Welcome back to another episode of Dreading, or if this is your first time here, welcome. Today we're going to be continuing our coverage of the case of Christine Banfield and how her husband did everything in his power to not only betray her trust, but to tarnish her memory. This will be our second video on the subject, and a link to the first video will be left in the description box down below, should you stumble upon this video before the other. That first video has a complete breakdown of their plan, alongside an analysis of their initial interaction with police after the murder, where both parties, oddly enough, fail to cry. But for those who may not want to watch the video that is nearly an hour in length just to watch this one, we'll do our best to summarize the case details here. Christine Banfield was a loving, gracious woman who worked as a pediatric nurse in intensive care. She was well loved by those who knew her, even in passing, because she was the type of person who cared for everyone in her orbit. She had a high-stress job, one that kept her on her feet at all times of day, but even under pressure, she was still described as an angel. What little free time she did have went to the two people she loved most in the world, her husband and their daughter Valerie. Christine helped out at a math tutoring business that he ran. She also joined multiple adult sports leagues just to spend time with him, and spend any spare time that she had in their company. She would do this despite how exhausted she might have been from work. But there was at least one person in her life who did not see her as a loving, caring, and all-around good person, and that unfortunately was her husband, Brendan Banfield. Brendan did not like how independent Christine was, and he certainly didn't enjoy the fact that she viewed him as an adult. She treated him with the same respect that she gave to everyone in their life, believing that she didn't have to watch over him like a child to make sure that he was doing the right thing all of the time. She worked a labor-intensive job, and so she had little extra time to devote to him specifically. But she was also taking on extra projects to help with their finances, making him feel like she didn't need him. And whenever they did have time together, she was always exhausted from work. The fact that she had other priorities outside of him made him feel lame and pathetic, like she didn't care about him as much as she should have. So he pursued extramarital affairs. Brendan would state that he had been cheating on Christine since before they were married, and that he was something of a Casanova. Because he often traveled for work with the IRS, he had the freedom to meet, seduce, and sleep with multiple different women over the years. He would state that of the multiple affairs that he had, Christine only knew about 2, and that they didn't matter all that much to him. That is, until he met Juliana. Since Brendan and Christine both had demanding jobs that would keep them out of the house all day, they would ultimately decide that they would need to get some more hands-on childcare. They considered daycares in the area, as well as nannies and other alternatives, before ultimately settling on a young au pair. And so, using one of the leading au pair exchange websites, they came into contact with Juliana Perez Magalhães, a 21-year-old from Brazil. She was beautiful, kind, and seemed to slot into the family perfectly, bonding with Christine over her want to go into nursing, and getting along amazingly well with Valerie. After meeting online, Juliana would join the Banfield home and become just another member of the family. Shortly thereafter, though, Brendan and her would start an affair. Brendan's relationship with Juliana escalated quickly. He told the 21-year-old that he loved her, and described his marriage to Christine as something he felt trapped inside of. But despite constantly complaining about his wife, he rejected the idea of divorce outright. So instead, he framed Christine as an insurmountable problem that they would have to get rid of. According to Brendan, she was an unfit mother who treated their daughter poorly whenever she was in her care, and implied that shared custody would put Valerie at risk. We have found absolutely no evidence that supports these claims. A more likely explanation is that Brendan understood how leaving his wife would not be viewed as sympathetically by his friends or family. Moreover, he also knew that when his relationship with a woman barely old enough to legally drink that he had brought over from another country was eventually revealed, he'd look like a creep. The affair would likely be seen less as a genuine relationship and more like a middle-aged man imploding his marriage in pursuit of someone younger. But saying as much to his new 21-year-old girlfriend would seem callous and weak. Instead, Brendan described them as two people being kept apart by circumstance. He told her that if Christine were no longer around, they could finally have a real life together. Over time, those conversations became increasingly dark, and Brendan would openly wish for his wife to die. And from his perspective, death solved a lot of problems that divorce could not. A divorce would involve custody battles, financial consequences, public embarrassment, and the near certainty that his affair would become known. But if Christine died unexpectedly, then the narrative changed completely. Brendan wouldn't be viewed as the husband who abandoned his wife for a younger woman. He'd be viewed as a grieving widower. His relationship with Juliana could be framed as something that they developed naturally in the aftermath of the tragedy. They were just two people bonding through grief in proximity. Under those circumstances, many people would suppress whatever suspicions that they had, simply because voicing them would feel inappropriate. In that scenario, Brendan would lose nothing. The affair would remain hidden, and he could move forward without having to accept responsibility for the destruction of his own marriage. Brendan's background in law enforcement had likely shaped the way he approached the problem. He had seen countless domestic murders carried out impulsively, followed by poorly constructed cover stories. Spouses staging suicides, failed poisoning attempts, crimes that unraveled almost immediately because the perpetrator underestimated how suspicious they would appear afterward. Brendan was determined to not make the same mistakes. Killing Christine was only one part of the plan. The more important objective was controlling the police's investigation and building their narrative surrounding Christine after her death. He needed to ensure that he was never ever viewed as a viable suspect in their eyes. So instead of constructing a story that made Christine sympathetic, he constructed one designed to humiliate her. Brendan and Juliana allegedly created an account on a fetish website using Christine's identity. The account described a woman interested in violent, non-consensual role-play scenarios involving knives and home invasions. Brendan uploaded photographs of his wife and used them to build the profile's credibility. The plan was deceptively simple. They would lure a man to the house under the impression that he was participating in a consensual fantasy. Brendan would ensure that the front door of the home was unlocked, and then remove Christine's ability to call for help, then leave the house before the man arrived. Meanwhile, Juliana would reportedly remain nearby as a lookout, monitoring the neighborhood and alerting Brendan once someone approached the home. And at that point, Brendan could return to the scene as a concerned husband, responding to an emergency. Acting as the hero, he would then interrupt the assault in progress, kill the intruder, and then kill Christine if she was still alive, and thus frame the murder on the man who had assaulted her. Her intruder would be framed as a violent sexual predator. Christine would look like a helpless victim, and Brendan would emerge as the grieving husband who arrived simply too late to stop it. Christine's death would appear random rather than personal. Any evidence of his infidelity could remain hidden beneath the chaos of the scene, and the man lured to the house would unlikely receive little public sympathy. Once, of course, he was branded as a rapist and murderer. But when the police would eventually investigate the crime, they would discover the FetLife account and Christine's messages asking to be assaulted. Her reputation as a loving wife and partner would be irrevocably tarnished. Friends and family would feel as if they had never known her. And Brendan would be viewed as the poor stooge whose wife had cheated on him and caused her own death. In his mind, the plan was perfect. And to gain the max level of sympathy possible, he would schedule his wife's murder for his own birthday. Where we last left off, Juliana Perez had been arrested in connection to the murder of Joseph Ryan, 7 months after the murders. Her charges came after the police were able to piece together that Joseph Ryan, the man who Brendan had hoped they would have written off as a sexual deviant, had been lured to the home, believing he was engaging consensually with Christine's fantasy. At that point, blood evidence had yet to come back from the lab, and all that they could prove, without a shadow of a doubt, was that Juliana had used the FetLife account, and that her shot to Ryan's chest had been fatal. But the officers knew that Juliana was not the one fully responsible for the murders. Though she was close to Christine, the FetLife page had clearly been made by someone who had, in the past, been intimate with her. There were too many specific personal details on it that would have only been known by a sexual partner. There was also the general complexity of the case at hand. Juliana was 21 at the time of the murders. She had a tentative grasp on the English language, and had zero prior knowledge about police investigations in America, or fetishes or links that were required to properly frame someone else online. The same way, Christine's behavior and personality made it impossible for her to be responsible for the conversations with Joseph Ryan, and so the police concluded that it was probably impossible for Juliana to have concocted such a clever plan, which left one other person with the motive to kill Mrs. Banfield, one other person who would benefit from her death, as well as have the insight into police investigation to lead them to the wrong person in the event their scheme was found out, and that would be Brendan himself. Juliana remained incarcerated for 10 months, maintaining her innocence and refusing to cooperate with the police investigation. The then 21-year-old was adamant that they had gotten everything wrong, that they had simply misunderstood her relationship with Brendan, and that they had only just started seeing each other after the murders, despite evidence to the contrary. She continued communicating with Brendan in prison, using her mother as a go-between. Their correspondence was loving and supportive, as Brendan would console her, telling her that he knew she wasn't guilty and that everything would be over soon. It should be noted that setting Juliana up as a fall guy was always in the back of Brendan's mind. He worked in investigations. He knew it was possible that the police could figure out that Christine had not been the one to set up the account. He knew that they could trace the cell phone data and see if it had been her phone, not just the same make and model of phone, but her phone specifically behind the posting. So he made sure that he specifically wasn't in the house when all of the messages were sent. He gave himself a solid alibi for most of the communications, whether that be going on a work trip or being spotted on security cameras outside of the home, which ensured that Juliana was left hanging. She would be the only person with the means, motive, and opportunity. Obviously, Brendan didn't want his new girlfriend to be caught, but he made sure that if his original plan failed, he did have a backup. Once again, he'd look like a hapless stooge, fooled by another sexually deviant woman, just a maniac. His trauma would morph from that of a grieving widow whose birthday was ruined by his evil, sexually depraved wife, who cheated on him, to a man who had been seduced by an exotic young woman, who killed his wife only to be with him. In every version of events, he would be victimized by his wife or his girlfriend, and therefore get away scot-free. There was also a certain amount of social power gained from being viewed as a victim in these situations. As noted, Brendan was aware that if he were to divorce his wife to be with a 21-year-old, his friends and family would think less of him. They'd say he was going through a midlife crisis and couldn't accept the relationship outright. But if his wife were to die tragically, then they'd give him the benefit of the doubt. The same logic applies here. If the police determined that Juliana was responsible for the entire scheme, his social circle would again rally around him, and any strange behavior could be written off. Things for Brandon were looking great, and Juliana kept quiet, still believing that he was looking out for her. She repeatedly professed her innocence, writing letters to her supporters denying any wrongdoing. Brendan Banfield would finally be arrested on September 15, 2024, over a year after the murder, and despite what the defense would say later in court, Banfield's arrest had nothing to do with Juliana, or her later coming forward against him. Nearly 600 days after the murders, the blood evidence taken at the scene had come back and proved what the police already suspected. Joseph Ryan had not killed Christine. Brendan Banfield had. The significance of the blood evidence cannot be overstated, as it proved without a doubt that Brendan had tried to stage the scene. The most damning piece of evidence was the bloodstains found on Joseph Ryan's hands. According to the story that Juliana and Brendan had told the police, after they had entered the bedroom while holding Ryan at gunpoint, the supposed rapist had gone mad and had begun slashing Christine in the throat with his small blunt kitchen knife. He should have been covered in her blood, with his hands appropriately drenched. However, when his hands were analyzed by blood spatter experts, they noted that the stains on his hands did not match the story. He had, quote, ribbon-like stains, unquote, showing that the blood on his hands had been transferred there, likely after he'd been shot in the chest. They noted that the blood had been placed on his hands in an unnatural way, when it wasn't wet and flowing. The prosecution could prove without a shadow of a doubt that Joseph Ryan had not stabbed Christine Banfield, meaning that the murder would have fallen squarely onto Brendan's shoulders, given that he had been the only one covered in her blood. When Juliana's lawyer explained the blood evidence and how the prosecution now knew that Brendan was responsible for the murders, the 22-year-old finally flipped on her lover. She seemed to understand that they were totally screwed, and that there was too much evidence to contend with, and that her only hope for freedom would be to work with the prosecution. She pleaded guilty to manslaughter, and agreed to take the stand against her ex if the case was to go to court, and that switch seemed to genuinely shock her former lover. The entire time he was cheating on his wife, Brendan always seemed to believe that he was one step ahead of everybody. His wife never knew how often he cheated on her. His friends never knew how depraved and cruel he actually was. And his girlfriend never knew he was setting her up to take the fall for him. To have Juliana, the woman he purposely sought out because of how much she needed him, to be the final nail in the coffin in his police investigation was completely unexpected for him. But unlike his young girlfriend, Brendan wasn't swayed by the amount of direct physical evidence. Oh no. Like most narcissists we've covered, Brendan felt like the DNA evidence couldn't account for all that much. He genuinely believed that he possessed the charm and storytelling ability to make a jury ignore the case the prosecution was bringing against him. All he needed to do was take the stand and tell them that he was a great person. Then they would understand. Before we go over Brendan's time on the stand, we should summarize the defense's argument against the state. As noted, the state brought the blood evidence, Juliana's statement, and a bevy of digital evidence that showed Christine was not responsible for her own sexual assault and murder. In response, Brendan and his legal counsel argued that the state had maliciously set him up, purposely pressuring Juliana to flip on him for nearly a year while incarcerated, because they simply didn't want to believe the facts, and that after months in prison, without hope of getting out, she eventually took a plea deal that required her to testify against Brendan, that the state's entire case hinged solely on her testimony and nothing else. This is simply not true. Juliana's testimony was the final nail in the coffin, but it wasn't the only nail, and Brendan had already been arrested by the time Juliana agreed to testify, meaning that the state was confident in their case without her statements. But the argument Brendan is putting forward does make sense, right? It scratches a particular itch that some of the jury members might relate to. The state is being unfair, pinning something heinous on innocent Brendan, pressuring his young, vulnerable girlfriend into turning against him for her own safety, and isolating him away from those who love him. He's the ultimate victim, once again, even though there is no real discernible reason as to why this would be done. They would then try to argue that most of the investigators in this case disagreed with the conclusions that the lead investigator came to, that being that Brendan was behind the plot, that multiple officers felt so morally outraged at the railroading that they saw happening to Brendan that they left the force in droves. Again, that is not the case. Most of the officers involved in this case would leave their positions, as many of them were promoted or simply requested to be moved to different departments. And that's it. That was their entire argument. Notably, Brendan didn't throw Juliana under the bus, saying that she had orchestrated everything, which most people expected. Instead, he stood firm in the camp that it was Christine's own sexual escapades that led to her own death, seemingly not understanding that the sheer amount of evidence presented in this case made that argument look ridiculous. After a week of trial, Brendan would take to the stand in his own defense, 100% certain that he'd be able to rewrite everything that the state had brought against him. He believed that he had a candor and charisma that could make the jury forget about the days of digital forensics and independent testimony and expert opinions. They would simply agree that he was just a wonderful guy who would never hurt his wife. So let's see if he was right. This footage comes courtesy of Fox 5 Washington, D.C., and the original upload will be left in the description box down below.
All right, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Your next witness?
Your Honor, I call Brendan Banfield.
All right, could you just move the microphone up for you? There you go.
Your Honor, I call Brendan Banfield.
All right.
Do you swear or affirm to testify truthfully in this case under penalty of law?
I do.
Thank you.
Before he begins his testimony, it's important to note what exactly he needs to accomplish with his time on the stand. The prosecution has laid their case out as plainly as possible. Brendan was a husband who wanted out of his marriage. He didn't want to go through the stress of divorce, especially with his torrid affair with his child's au pair. Kind of a cute rhyme. So instead, he went through months of planning her death. They had the blood evidence, which proved he, at the very least, attempted to manipulate at the scene, layering his wife's blood onto Joseph Ryan after killing them both, as well as his girlfriend's statement and testimony. The sheer amount of evidence against him would be overwhelming and difficult to dismiss, but of course he will try. His goal here is to make the entire ordeal look like a setup from the police, that they were out to get him and Juliana from the start, and that he had absolutely no motive to want his wife dead, that he's being unfairly railroaded by the police for some reason, and that Christine was responsible for her own murder. His lawyer would later put forward the notion that there were multiple investigators who did not believe Brendan was guilty, and that multiple officers would be removed from their positions when they expressed that they didn't agree with pursuing him as a lead, that there were essentially a few higher-ups who were determined to pin the blame on Brendan and force the evidence to fit that conclusion. Never mind the blood evidence. Never mind the fact that Christine had never expressed any interests in non-consensual fantasies or fetishes of any kind. He believes he can convince the jury and the public to overlook any and all evidence against him only with his words. There are, of course, multiple issues with that. The first would be that the police had no real motivation to set him up like this, as covered in our previous video. They would view Brendan favorably, given the fact that he is fellow law enforcement. He had no prior history of crimes or had a negative history with the investigating officers, so it would make very little sense for them to target him in this way. In other cases where the defendant will argue that they've been set up or unfairly targeted by police, those individuals will showcase how the police refused to look into any other suspects. The police, either through laziness or prejudice, chose to pursue the suspect without looking at anyone else or following other leads. But that is obviously not the case here. The police had spent months combing through Christine's life, following the threads that Brendan had left out for them, but still felt that something was off. Pursuing him as a suspect was more difficult than simply believing that Joseph Ryan was a rapist, and yet they did so anyway. So that line of thinking falls flat. The second issue was debunked pretty easily by the prosecution, and that was the fact that the majority of the investigators who had been involved in the case were on the record as saying that they believed Brendan was guilty. And the majority of them had not left the force, but had either been promoted or transferred to other departments in the time that it took for the case to go to trial. The very idea that there was one person who had their sights set on Brendan from the beginning was a complete fabrication. But Brendan needs that to be true. He needs the case against him to be a setup and a farce, because otherwise it means that the plan he worked on for months, his masterpiece, was a failure. At this point, Brendan's entire self-image had been built around how much smarter he was than those around him. He was a serial cheater, constantly lying and manipulating his wife and girlfriend. He also worked as an investigator, constantly besting dumber criminals who went through great pains to get away with their schemes. If he acknowledges the evidence that is against him, that he made multiple errors in the commissioning of his masterful murder, then his whole world would turn upside down. He cannot address the actual evidence against him and respond to it, because that would completely undermine his entire sense of self. So he has an uphill battle. He has to convince the jury that he did love his wife, that she was the cause of her own death, and that every other piece of testimony and evidence they have heard thus far has been nothing but lies. That the police forced his girlfriend to perjure herself, that they were out to get him for virtually no reason, and that he, a serial cheater, a philanderer, is an innocent victim in all of this. So let's see if he was successful.
Sir, can you state your name and spell your name for the court reporter?
Brendan Banfield, Brendan Banfield.
And Brendan, how old are you?
40.
And you were married to Christine Banfield, correct?
Yes.
And how long were you and Christine together?
We were together since we were 18.
And how did you meet?
We met freshman year at college at Quinnipiac University.
Now, where are you originally from?
I am from Long Island, New York.
And is that where you grew up?
Yes, I lived there the majority of my life.
Now, what prompted you to come down to Virginia?
I received a promotion from my job with the Internal Revenue Service. I previously was a tax compliance officer, and I received a promotion to special agent with IRS criminal investigation.
Pausing to note that despite his belief otherwise, Brendan is not a particularly charismatic or charming person, which is bad, given that he needs to charm the jury into believing him over the evidence.
Okay, we'll get back to that later. Let's talk about your family. Before Christine's death, describe for the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what your family was.
My family was me, Christine, and my daughter, Valerie.
Quote, my daughter, unquote. Not our daughter, but mine. This is a massive red flag in his testimony because it showcases how he had already divorced Christine from the family mentally. Valerie was Christine's daughter. She loved her and wanted to spend the majority of her free time showing her daughter how she loved her. Subconsciously, Brendan is removing Christine from the family unit, placing her on the outside and stating that Christine wasn't good enough to be his daughter's mother, the same way he had done to Juliana and Valerie herself. In our previous video, we noted that the police became suspicious of the relationship between Juliana and Brendan after a social worker overheard Valerie asking her au pair if she was going to marry her dad and become her new mom shortly after the murder. That indicates that the 4-year-old was somewhat aware of the relationship between the two, or at the very least, Brendan had been speaking ill of her mother to the child, in order to build up the relationship with Juliana. These are all points that would have been laid out in the trial, so to have Brendan so carelessly label Valerie as his child and not theirs is pretty damning.
And what kind of things would you do? Well, prior to you having Valerie, what kind of things would you and Christine enjoy together?
Christine and I had a very active social life. We spent a lot of time with our friends. This included playing board games and cards, as well as going on vacations together, and going on vacations with other couples that we were friends with. We did a lot of hiking, going to different forests and different mountains kind of around the country. We also spent some time. We played kickball together. We did quite a bit intramurally.
Okay. And when Valerie came along, were you in New York or were you in Virginia?
We were still in New York at that point.
Okay. And so how old was she when you left New York?
She was not one yet. She was 10, 11 months.
Okay. Now, what kind of things, and sorry, once again, before Valerie, what kind of things would, in addition to the hiking, what kind of things would you and Christine enjoy doing together?
I would say that we spent a lot of time together. When we weren't working, we did a lot of work around our house. We had two dogs, two huskies that we took care of. We're often taking them on our walks and hikes.
And so, in addition to those things, you also both worked?
Yes.
And what did Christine do for work?
Christine had several different jobs. Her primary position was as a pediatric intensive care unit nurse. At other points, she did private health care for an individual family. She also did some product training for medical devices, and she also worked as a sexual assault nurse examiner for several years.
Okay. And where was that? Was that in New York?
Those were in New York, and when we came to Virginia, she continued as a pediatric intensive care unit nurse and trainer for Inova here in Virginia.
Okay. Now, in terms of your work, when you were in New York, what did you do?
I mostly worked for the Internal Revenue Service. Before I came to Virginia, I was a tax compliance officer. I also worked at a math tutoring center known as Mathnasium, where I was a center director, and Christine actually worked there with me as well.
Was this a business that the two of you owned?
Yes, this was a business that we owned together and worked at together.
Okay, and how did you divide the duties in this small business?
Generally, we had about 5 to 7 employees in addition to ourselves. I ran most of the day-to-day activity which would be the after-school hours for when kids would come and study math with the tutors. I did math assessments. I spoke to the parents about where their child was and how we could generally get them to where they would be needed to be, where at their current grade level. Christine helped quite a lot with the hiring process. She worked on marketing. She also spent a lot of time tutoring some of the younger students.
And how long did the two of you run that business together?
About 3 years.
Okay. And when you moved from New York to Virginia, what, if anything, did you do with the business?
Prior to moving to Virginia, we sold the business because we weren't going to be able to operate it from Virginia.
Brendan has been testifying for nearly 10 minutes now, and his tone has remained remarkably flat throughout. That's notable, given the fact that he's talking about his late wife, who he purported to love. This was the person he had spent his entire adult life with, the woman he wants the jury to believe that he cared for above all else. And yet, there is no emotion in his voice. He isn't upset or wistful on the stand, as if he misses her. Instead, he speaks completely factually about Christine and their life together, which is both good and bad. On the plus side, he isn't acting the way we've seen people like Ezra McCandless behave, where their testimony begins to feel more or less like cheesy acting. He isn't mimicking what love or sadness looked like, and is solely focusing on the question he is asked. But on the downside, it starts to feel hollow and strange. His main goal here is to convince us, the jury, that he loved his wife so much that we should disregard any evidence against him, that he is more trustworthy than the crime scene technicians, as well as the police and the forensic specialists. And yet, he can't be asked to talk about what his wife was actually like, what she was interested in, things she liked to do, anything. He can't even feign any sort of sadness, which feels incongruent with what he's trying to put forward. He'll talk about what they did together vaguely, in her job, but nothing about what Christine was actually like and what kind of person she was.
Now, you indicated previously that Valerie was born up in New York. How old was she when she came down to Virginia with you?
I believe about 11 months. I don't know the exact date that we moved here, but yes.
Now, in terms of Christine's career and your career moving from New York to Virginia, were you both in line with coming down here for your job?
It was a promotion for myself, but it was also ended up being a promotion for Christine when she applied to Inova, because she was going to be training the newer hires as well after she finished her own orientation period. And so this was going to be a pay raise, and she always liked mentoring new nurses when she was at Stony Brook Hospital. So this allowed her to more formally control some of the training process of the nurses in the pediatric ICU.
And so did she look at this move, even though it was for your job and your training, did she look at this as something that was a positive, or?
I would say that once she started applying to positions here, because she applied to like Children's National Hospital and a few others, and she realized some of the opportunities with her background, that this was going to be positive for her career as well. But I mean, she was also concerned because we weren't going to be next to our family, which was mainly in New York at that point.
Okay.
But there was a lot of benefit, and we viewed that it was beneficial to us and our family and Valerie.
Now, you met when you were 18, so how long were you together, including your non-married life and married life?
About 19 and a half years.
And how would you characterize your relationship with Christine?
For the most part, we were pretty inseparable. We were together the entire time. We didn't break up at any point. We were from college to our first jobs after college, to buying our first house together, to marriage, to getting a dog and a second dog, and then moving down here. We were always together, always planning for the future. This was part of our life.
Okay. Now, let's talk a little bit about Valerie. Were you and Christine actively involved in Valerie's life?
Yes, I would say that we were very active in Valerie's life.
Okay, when you invited Valerie into the family, when she came into the family, how did that work within regard to your family dynamic?
Mr. Carroll, I think you had the wrong name. That's your... when you invited Valerie into the family?
Their daughter,
The daughter? Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
I mean, when Valerie was born, I'm sorry, can you ask the question again?
So I'm sorry, there's a little confusion, I apologize. Valerie, your daughter, I said invited her into your life.
Yeah.
When she was born, how did that affect the relationship, and how did you all kind of change to take care of Valerie?
I would say that Valerie brought all of our family closer together, including my mother and our in-laws. It kind of brought everyone near to each other. There was a lot of overlap, a lot of family visits, a lot of care from specifically both grandmothers, helping both me and Christine when Valerie was born, and that it was a very joyous moment for our family. She was really the first grandchild for both sets of grandparents.
And so when she was born, it sounded like a positive thing for everything.
Yes.
And what, if any, involvement did you have, and what involvement did Christine have, knowing that you're both working full time?
So our schedules are a bit strange for childcare purposes. Christine would work 12-and-a-half-hour shifts, which generally meant that she was leaving at 6:30 in the morning and would be coming back at roughly 7:30 at night. When I was in New York, I was working 6 a.m. until 2:30 p.m. And so on days where both of us were working, generally one of the grandmothers was the primary caregiver when Christine's maternity leave and my leave ended after Valerie was born.
Brendan's attorney is asking fairly open-ended questions because he wants his client to have the space to give a more well-rounded answer. He wants Brendan to bring the jury into what their home life was like after Valerie's birth, how they had to rely on their families to help them when they were both back at work, and give us a peek into what kind of parents they were. He could use this time to talk about how overwhelmed they were, how they didn't realize that parenthood would be so difficult, and more. But he stays focused on answering the question as plainly as possible, which is something we don't usually see in these cases. Anthony Tott, Nancy Brophy, Robert Tellis, and almost every other defendant we've seen take the stand in their own defense will take the time to add a small bit of humanity to their statements. They'll try to talk about their relationships in a normal, conversational manner, but Brendan doesn't.
Okay, and so it worked out between all of you?
Yes, it seemed to be going pretty well.
Okay, now, how old is Valerie now?
Valerie's she'll be 8 in March, so 7 currently.
Okay, and do you, since this situation has started, do you have contact with her?
Yes, I talk to her basically every day by video chat, often also by phone.
Now, when she was younger, what kind of involvement did you have with her education?
I spent a lot of time on her education. I guess I've spent a lot of time teaching math over the years, and even from before she was in preschool, I spent a lot of time basically what I would call numerical fluency, starting with counting and moving up through. I've currently been working with times tables with her, which is above grade level. So I've been doing math work with her basically from 2 until present. But I also monitor quite a bit of what work she does at school, and with this, I spend a lot of time reading with her, and we do. I guess I would say that I make. I call them activity pages, but essentially they're like crossword puzzles and word searches, rhyming words, or consonant combinations, such as like ST or CK, and then I'll give a description of a word, and then the word will match. So if it was like TR, and this is a plant that grows tall, she might write tree, and things like that, so that she would work additionally on whatever letter combinations they're currently working on in school as additional practice. I do a lot of design work for that also.
Okay, and
I don't know if this is a strategy that his attorney came up with, but these questions so far have been horrible. The prosecution is arguing that Brendan is a selfish and uncaring person, and instead of focusing on the supposedly beautiful relationships that he fostered that counteract that argument, his attorney continues to ask questions that would lead the jury to agreeing with the prosecution's assertion. When Brendan was asked about his relationship with Christine, he doesn't talk about her interests, her hobbies, or things that she enjoyed that he didn't. Things that would have made her ultimately who she was. All of that was simply glossed over so he could talk about things that they did. We enjoyed this, we liked this, we did that. It's a subtle difference, but it's impactful, and showcases how little he actually cared for her. Anything that she liked is unimportant. The only things that mattered are things that he also enjoyed. And we see the same thing when Brendan is given space to talk about his daughter. He doesn't talk about her hobbies, interests, and whatnot. He talks about how he has spent a significant amount of time teaching her math and other subjects, because he is such a good father. Which, again, isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it feels awkward. In other cases where a parent is separated from their children and takes the stand in their own defense, their attorneys usually give them the proper space to brag about their children, or to tell a story about their parenting that endears them to the jury. My daughter's favorite toy is this, and we always played that when I came home from work. Her favorite show is this, and on my days off we would sleep on the couch and fall asleep watching the show. Her favorite food is this, and I make it for her whenever she feels sick. Right? These sorts of stories work to humanize the defendant considerably, especially given the nature of the charges. But Brendan was not asked about his daughter's hobbies or interests, only about how he has been tutoring her since she was an infant. It's also notable that, as he's speaking, his tone has not changed. His voice is extremely flat and unaffected by the circumstances that he's in, even though, again, this line of questioning is meant to humanize him to the jury and to the public. It's extremely off-putting, especially when we take into account that he believed himself to be a master manipulator.
and you're designing these things for her to be able to continue kind of working with you?
Yes.
Okay. Now, what about things like science and engineering and all that sort of thing? Did you ever get into any of that with?
So we always did quite a bit of Legos, basically starting at like 2. But after that, we started doing these projects from Kiwi Company, where you would do things like make a little device that would spin a coin for you, or that would launch a disc and you could aim it at a target. We went past that, and now we were doing these Crunch Lab boxes, where we were working on things like rocket launches, and there was quite a few others. There was designing of animals and like stuffed animals, and there was also like different circuits where it would show you how to design basically a button, and then when pressing the button would allow like animations to move or things like that, and it would show more details of how a lot of electronics would work.
What kind of things would you and Christine do with her?
We spent a lot of time in nature, the three of us. Behind our house is Frying Pan Farm. So walking distance, we have walking trails, and we can walk to Frying Pan Farm where Valerie would definitely like to see the animals. We had a membership to the National Aquarium in Baltimore, and that was, we went there frequently. Sorry, was there more to your question?
It was about the three of you doing things together.
We would go on vacations. There was quite a bit of spending time with family in terms of going to the water, whether going to the beaches or even with my in-laws going to on their boat and going fishing.
Now, how did you observe the relationship between Christine and Valerie?
This is a massively important question because the prosecution has shown that Brendan was extremely critical of his wife's parenting. He believed that she was a bad mother, that she hardly had any time for her daughter, and that if they divorced, and she were to have any custody over their daughter, Valerie would suffer. They were able to show that through messages he had sent to Juliana, as well as her testimony. It's in Brendan's best interest here to lie about that, and say that he believed his wife was a fantastic mother, because it would negate the prosecution's motive. He should simply downplay any criticisms he had towards his deceased wife, and praise her mothering abilities here, if only to demonstrate that he had no reason to want her dead. But let me ask you, based solely on the 18 minutes of testimony we've watched thus far, would you take Brendan's word for it? Does he seem at all credible to you? So let's see what he does.
Christine loved Valerie very dearly, and Valerie was very attached to her mother. This is, it was tragic, their separation, but, when Valerie was always very excited as soon as Christine would get home from work. She would run up to her mother and say, be happy, and call her mama. And, they spent quite a bit of time doing art-related projects. Christine would often bring Valerie to dance when she was not working.
Brendan completely biffed that one. That was such a poor answer that it would be comical if not for the fact that this is a man who cannot bear to give his deceased wife any sort of compliment. First, after he's asked the question, his eyes start darting around between the jury and his attorney, which is commonly associated with being uncomfortable. He swivels his head as if disagreeing with everything he's saying. He's smiling nervously and seems genuinely confused as to how to answer the question. The sheer amount of pauses that he's taking while looking at his lawyer as if to ask, oh man, oh geez, what do I say here, is simply astounding. He asked if his wife was a good mother, what her relationship with Valerie was like. It's an extremely simple question to answer, and one where he could have said that she was an amazing mother who loved their daughter, and punctuated that statement with a story about how they spent time together, or something human. It should have been so easy to lie about that. But he doesn't want to say those words specifically. He doesn't want to give Christine any sort of praise, even after he murdered her savagely. So he tries and fails to weasel himself out of saying those words. That statement, Christine was a great mother, never leaves his lips. Instead, he says that she did love their daughter, and that Valerie had a great fondness towards her as well. It's a stilted, uncomfortable phrase, one that would stand out to everyone in the courtroom. We're going to skip past 14 minutes of Brendan's testimony, as he just looks at old family vacation photos and monotonously talks about them. So again, he's unable to display any sort of emotion or discuss these images with any sort of humanity or pizzazz. So we had little commentary to add. With that in mind, if you do want to see the full interrogation, we'll leave a link to the original video in the description box down below, though I wouldn't recommend it because it's pretty boring.
Sir, let's move on. Did you have a relationship with Juliana Perez Magahais?
Yes.
And tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, when did that start?
I guess the relationship started as professional in October of 2021 when she came to be a au pair or a nanny for our family.
Okay, and she came through an agency?
Yes, from Cultural Care is the agency.
What were the parameters of the cultural care exchange that she came through? Do you know?
She would come and provide childcare for the family. It would include room and board, that she would be able to take educational opportunities. such as at a local community college. She can work, I believe, up to 45 hours a week, and she would generally provide a loving environment and activities for Valerie.
Okay. And had you had a previous au pair before her?
Yes, we had an au pair prior to her. Her name was Amanda. She was with us for 2.5 years.
And so Juliana was your second au pair?
Correct.
And so explain kind of from when she got there in October 21, what were her duties and how did you utilize her time when you and Christine were working?
So once we moved to Virginia, our work schedules were, I guess, more erratic because my work schedule was not set any longer as well. So Christine would still be working generally the 12.5-hour days, but I may have to work at hours that could start at 5 in the morning and sometimes could be going late into the evening. So while generally I would know what I had to do for the day and maybe how long it would take, it wasn't convenient for conventional childcare in terms of having Valerie go to, say, a daycare, because generally they're not open at 6:30 in the morning until nighttime. So generally, the au pair that we had would work similar hours to that Christine had. And when I got home from work, the au pair would be no longer working for the day, or if it was on the weekend that Christine had to work, the au pair generally would be off. So the au pair kind of worked basically 3 12-hour shifts coinciding with Christine's job most of the time. But sometimes if Christine didn't have that many hours during the regular work week, Christine may choose to have the au pair work other hours so that Christine could get things done around the house or other activities that she had to do.
Brendan's statement here is interesting, but not in a way that he would have noticed. He hated Christine to the point to where, while in trial for her murder, he would not say that she was a good mother. In his previous testimony, he was the ever-present father who put his daughter before everything else, while Christine would laze around, only thinking about herself. But when asked to recount the au pair's schedule, he admits that Christine's work hours were more manageable than his own, and that she would often take over for the childcare worker, not the other way around. Christine was the one working 12-hour shifts, then relieving Juliana. She was the one who had a more reliable schedule with their daughter, but he's only able to admit that fact in a roundabout, strange way.
So in terms of your contact with Juliana, describe for the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, what kind of contact would you have on a daily basis prior to having a relationship?
Prior to having a relationship, it was mostly logistical. I may inform her when I was going to get home from work, if I had any delays, making sure that Valerie was getting to say dance lessons if Christine and I were not available then. Juliana would generally bring Valerie to preschool on the days that she was working. And we might just talk about activities for her to do with Valerie on days that they were working.
Okay. And when was it that this turned from a working relationship to something else?
In August of 2022.
Okay. Describe for the ladies and gentlemen of the jury how that happened.
So in August, Juliana and I were home alone. I had to work on both Saturday and Sunday, so I guess I believe the original day was a Friday. Christine and Valerie were in New York, and Juliana started texting me while I was preparing food in the kitchen. It was an unusual line of text as she was complaining about.
Let me, if I may just
Sure.
interrupt, where was she and where were you in the house?
I was in the kitchen. I believe she was upstairs in her room.
Okay, sorry, please go, continue.
It was a unusual text conversation in terms of that Juliana was complaining about her dating activity and the people that she was seeing at the time. I don't particularly like texting, and I think I basically said that if she wanted to talk, that she could come to the kitchen.
Pausing because there are a few things to note here. The first is that Brendan is framing himself as being the one who was pursued, that Juliana, the young, hot, exotic au pair, threw herself at him in a complete unbridled fit of lust, despite the fact that he was happily married. He's attempting to push responsibility off of himself in this instance as if he had no control over his actions, even though he was married and her employer. It doesn't matter if she came into the room naked. It was his responsibility not to sleep with her. So Brendan's ego is massive, to the point to where it feels deeply delusional. And this is honestly one of the most uninteresting people we've ever had the displeasure of covering. And yet he views himself as a prize to be won. That women everywhere are just eyeing him up and down like a piece of meat, wanting to sleep with him the moment he walks into the room. It's delusional, but let's continue.
Okay, and what if anything happened?
At that point, Juliana showed me quite a few screenshots of her dating app. I believe it was Hinge, and the people that were in the Hinge app all had similar names to me. Their names were Brendan and Brandon and Brennan. And these were people that she had matched with on the app.
And so, and how did it progress from there?
She was making quite a few jokes about it. At some point, I finished cooking and was eating. I don't believe that Juliana actually ate dinner at the same time. We talked about other unrelated things. Talked about there was some family history of alcoholism and how her family in Brazil was dealing with that. And we spent maybe an hour and a half or 2 hours talking about some random things, but also about her dating history. During this time, when she was talking about different people, she was described people that she was interested in, people that were taller, people that were older, and it appeared to me that she was, along with the photos, the screenshots that she had shown me of people that she had matched with, that she was basically describing me. Also, I guess when we were having this conversation, we were sitting at the island in the kitchen, and she scooted her seat closer to mine a couple times.
And so what did you do at that point?
I did not stop her advances. At some point, I told her that I was going to go upstairs, indicating that I was going to go to bed. And she said that she was tired and that she was going to do the same. A little bit of information about the upstairs of my house. Once you go upstairs, the master bedroom is to the left, and all the other bedrooms are to the right. So her bedroom, a guest bedroom, and Valerie's bedroom are to the right. When I went upstairs, I went to the left, and she also took a step towards the left with me. And we had a brief conversation there, and then she came with me into my bedroom.
Brendan sets himself up as a passive participant in the affair. It was Juliana, his 21-year-old child care worker, who pursued him, and he simply let it happen. But just by looking at it and not listening to him, that doesn't seem plausible. Moreover, while Brendan is recounting this story, he displays absolutely no shame or remorse about cheating on his deceased wife. He's on trial for murder, and he's smugly recounting how he was seduced away from his wife, as if, again, he's a sexual prize to be won. For the first 30 minutes plus of his testimony, he was bland, monotone, and seemingly annoyed about having to talk about his wife at all, and failed to compliment her parenting ability. But when he's allowed to talk about the woman he cheated on her with, the woman he is accused of killing her to be with, he cannot help but smile. Brendan didn't like his wife. She treated him like an equal partner instead of a prize. She didn't need to rely on him the same way he didn't need to rely on her. And she was confident in the fact that they were together not out of need but out of love. But Brendan didn't like that. He wanted someone who needed him, someone whose money and ability to stay in the country relied solely on him, who made him feel as if he was cool and important, even though he was boring and bland. The fact that he seems to feel confident in his time on the stand thus far is telling, because he's done a horrendous job that borders on delusional.
Did you ever talk to her either that night or later about a continuing relationship?
We did not talk that night about continuing a relationship. We did talk about, I would say, in the next few days, I guess we spoke a little bit about the relationship. She had indicated that she was concerned that I was going to tell Christine and that she was going to be essentially fired and sent back and lose her job.
Brendan cuts himself off from saying sent back to her home country, because it would display the obvious power imbalance between the two, which he is trying desperately not to do. But even when he changes course midway through his statement and says that Juliana was scared that she was going to get fired, that still showcases who exactly held all the power in the situation. It also appears that he cannot help himself from smiling smugly as he talks about her, which is equal parts disgusting and agitating. He thinks he is better than every other person in that courtroom, that he is the smartest person there, and that he has everyone eating out of the palm of his hand. Meanwhile, he has metaphorically walked into every bear trap possible, showcasing his guilt in ways that are almost unbelievable.
Which I indicated that I wasn't going to tell her.
Okay. Did you tell her anything about what had just happened and what that was?
Yes, I mean, that would be that we were having an affair. I had also indicated to her that I had previous affairs, and that really this was just an affair, and not that there would be no other relationship, that there's, that basically that this is something that I have had affairs previously, and that there's nothing that changes in mine and Christine's relationship.
This is going to be the crux of Brendan's defense, that his relationship with Juliana, as scandalous as it may have appeared to the public, meant absolutely nothing to him. He loved Christine, despite breaking her trust and putting her sexual health in jeopardy, and that he would never ever leave her to be with Juliana. It just so happened that his wife died, which left him open to being with Juliana. But all of that was just a coincidence. This is already a hard sell as it is, as the vast majority of people would feel deeply heartbroken and betrayed if their spouse ever cheated on them. But if Brendan was the charming manipulator that he believed himself to be, he could have made this lie a bit easier to believe, had he spoken highly of his wife and gone over the family photos with any sort of emotion, or simply had appeared deeply impacted by her death at all. Maybe the jury would have felt that he was a loving husband who simply couldn't keep it in his pants, but he failed to do any of that.
Now, was Christine aware of your affair?
I don't believe she was aware of the affair between me and Juliana.
Was she aware of your previous affairs?
She was aware of at least 2 previous affairs.
Okay, and likewise, were you aware of her affairs?
Yes, I was also aware that she had affairs.
Okay, and how did the two of you manage in your relationship moving forward with those facts?
So I guess in about 2013, it was found that we had quite a few discussions. At that point, Christine was working at the private healthcare, and she would travel for work for an entire week at a time, basically. And during this time, she would not be available to come home. Her shift was literally the entire week. So we were separated a lot. My job, I wasn't in at my previous position, but my job also required some travel. I spent about 6 months in Jacksonville. I spent another month in Kansas City, and I was living in New York, but I also spent some time here in the DC area. So we were both traveling quite a lot for work. I guess that was poor for our relationship at that point. We had gone to therapy. We went to couples therapy for several months. And we had decided that we were going to continue our marriage.
Again, to be plain, we found no evidence outside of Brendan's statements that Christine was ever unfaithful in their marriage. That's not to say that she wasn't, but there's no supporting evidence. And we can't trust the word of a man who savagely murdered her and attempted to humiliate her after death.
So now back to 2022. You and Juliana were having an affair outside of the knowledge of Christine?
Yes.
And how did that look on a daily basis?
It's not the same. It's not the same all the time, but I guess it depended, a lot on Christine's work schedule. So Juliana may spend time with me and Valerie during the day instead of when I would get home from work. Juliana used to just kind of leave. She might go to her room or she might go out prior to our relationship. And afterwards, it was more like she chose to do whatever I was going to do with Valerie, whether it was going to be stay home or, like I was Valerie's soccer coach. So when I would go to soccer practice, sometimes Juliana would go, even though I wasn't interacting with her at all. Basically, she was choosing to be with me whenever she could choose to be with me.
Brendan has once again accidentally made himself look even worse here, because he was confirming that he was, at the very least, deeply inappropriate with Juliana in front of his daughter, even though he said the relationship did not mean anything to him, and he would never jeopardize his marriage. He was spending his free time in the company of both his mistress and his daughter. He put the burden of his affair on his daughter's shoulders, and even though he says that he didn't interact with Juliana in an inappropriate way publicly, why should anyone believe him? Why should you give him, the man who slept with a 21-year-old in his marital bed, the benefit of the doubt, especially when he continues to talk about this extramarital affair as if it makes him cool?
So let's move toward the October timeframe of 2022. Did you ever create any sort of a plan with Juliana?
No, there was no plan. At this point, our relationship is maybe 6 to 8 weeks old. I think that it's an absurd line of questioning for something that is not serious, that a plan was made to get rid of my wife. That is absolutely crazy.
So with no plan, let's talk about Silver Eagle Armory.
Sure.
Okay. So how did that happen where Juliana went to you or went with you to the Silver Eagle Armory?
So it was basically one of those things where it was something that I was going to be doing outside the house. Generally, I would go to a shooting range every month, every other month, to practice before my qualifications for my job.
And how many times did you have to qualify for your job?
You have to qualify twice a year, but there's practice there's practice on the opposite quarters. So there would be, I guess, 2 trainings and 2 qualifications. And generally I would go practice prior to having one of those training sessions or qualifications at my job.
And how is it that Juliana ended up coming?
I was going to be going there anyways. She thought it would be fun to attend as well, as it was going to be out of the house. It was something that there wasn't going to be risk of being found out by Christine.
Okay, so the relationship continued into that October, December timeframe?
Yes.
Okay, so when you're in terms of training for people that go to Silver Eagle, is there any sort of training class or anything like that?
The first time you go there, they do a safety class, making sure that you understand the fundamentals of using a firearm, that you treat all firearms if they're loaded. You never point a firearm at anything that you're not willing to shoot. Things like that, making sure that you understand the safety mechanisms of a firearm, and making sure that you understand range etiquette, that the gun should always be pointed down range, should never be pointed at another person, things like that.
And is this something that you knew through your training?
Yes, this is something that is also discussed in my trainings.
And so would this training that you're talking about at Silver Eagle be for someone who's never shot a gun before?
Yes, it would be for a kind of a beginner lesson.
Okay, and she went with you twice, correct?
Yes, she did.
Was there, in having her come to the range, was there any plan that she was going to back you up on some plan?
I mean, there was no plan at this point when we had gone to the range. There was none of the suspect email account. There was no FetLife account. There was no Telegram messages. None of that existed at the point that we went to the range.
Okay. Now, did FetLife or Gmail or Telegram ever exist for you?
I did not know about them until after Christine died. I didn't get to see them until after Juliana's arrest.
Brendan has made a couple of crucial errors here in such a short amount of time. First is that he scoffs at the very idea that there would be a plan to kill his wife, as if there is no supporting evidence. He tries to make the assertion seem ludicrous, even though there is plenty of supporting evidence. After nearly 40 minutes of testimony, he believes that he's been able to charm the jury into believing everything he said, even though the opposite is true. Moreover, he says that there wasn't a plan, quote, at that point, unquote, which implies later that he did make a plan. He clarifies his statement further by characterizing the relationship as being new, less than 2 months old, which implies that he would have been willing to kill his wife, but only if the relationship was a bit older. This is not something that you'd want to imply when you're on trial for your wife's murder. He then tries and fails to reframe going to the shooting range with Juliana as being some sort of fun date, a date away from his loving and devoted wife. The prosecution has used the fact that Brendan has taken his young girlfriend to the gun range as evidence of their plan, especially given the fact that he had asked her to shoot Joseph Ryan. But in his recounting, it was just a fun date idea that she had, because they could get out of the house together. But even more illuminating is the fact that when Brendan brings up the FetLife account, as well as the Telegram messages and the other evidence against him, his demeanor changes considerably. His voice becomes uneven and nervous, his eyes become shifty, and he behaves similarly to when he was asked if Christine was a good mother. To have his demeanor switch so quickly is a sign of deception, and would no doubt be obvious to the jury. Everything he has done thus far is indicative of guilt. We reviewed plenty of other defendants on the stand, and while most fail, there are usually aspects of their time that humanize them to the jury, that make them question what the prosecution has put forward, but that doesn't happen here.
And you're talking about the criminal reports, the police reports, things like that?
Yes.
The things that the Commonwealth gives?
Yes.
Okay. So let's move toward, so let me ask you this. There's some dates that came up recently. Some dates that came up recently relating to the FetLife account and lack of activity. Do you remember what occurred, what was going on January 13th and 14th of 2023?
Not specifically, I don't.
Okay. Do you remember a weekend in Winchester?
Yes, I do remember a weekend in
Who was
Winchester.
with you in Winchester?
I went to Winchester for work. I was going to be there for 2 days. I was going to be there for 2 days. So I had a hotel, and Juliana drove there herself, not with me. Later, the evening of the first day, if I remember correctly.
And she stayed there with you?
Yes.
Okay. Now, do you remember what was going on at home with Christine and Valerie?
I believe my mother-in-law, Linda, was with Christine and Valerie.
Okay. That was on the 31st of January and February 1st?
I don't remember the exact date of Winchester, but...
Okay. Would that be common for your mother-in-law or even your mother to come down to help out with the kids?
Well, there's only Valerie, but yes, it is extremely common that the grandmothers came to visit us. Oftentimes, each of them may come almost as every 4 to 6 weeks, and they may spend between 5 and 10 days. As I had said before, Valerie was the only grandchild of both sides of the grandparents, and so there was quite a lot of support from the grandparents with Valerie.
Here, Brendan and his attorney are trying to explain away why Christine never accessed the FetLife account or messaged any of the men she was trying to get to assault her while Juliana and him were out of the house. According to digital forensics, the account and messages would only be sent when one or both of them were in the home with Christine, but never while she was alone. They're trying to showcase that even though he was on a loving weekend getaway with his girlfriend, that Christine was not alone. His mother was at the house, and that is likely why the account was not used. But that line of reasoning makes even less sense. Christine worked multiple 12-hour shifts in the pediatric intensive care unit and was often exhausted for days afterwards. His mother was coming to help relieve her of the stress and to take care of Valerie, meaning that Christine would have at least some time to herself. Moreover, with his mother in the home, taking care of Valerie for free, she would reasonably have more time to message her own suitors. There were less people in the house than normal. She had time to herself, without her husband, child, or au pair interrupting. If she were as sexually starved as Brendan had characterized her on the account, she would have used it, but she never so much as even looked at porn. That said, if Brendan were in fact innocent, it would be unfair to ask him why his wife, who he barely liked and didn't care for, did something without him present. He can't explain her behavior. He can only really explain his own, but the attempt to try to anyway is interesting. Brendan knows the case against him. He's looked over all the evidence, listened to his attorney as he has explained everything to him, and still feels like he could easily convince the public of his innocence. And this particular detail is something he feels very strongly about, so much so that he has had his lawyer ask him about it, so he could provide an alternative point of view. This is why Brendan thinks that he's smarter than everyone around him, including the police who easily uncovered his scheme, because only his brilliant mind was able to come up with this alternative perspective that perfectly explains his wife's actions, while simultaneously making almost no sense.
Okay. Now, January 13th and January 14th, was that one of those days when someone was visiting? Or that weekend?
They visited frequently, but I don't remember specifically that they visited that weekend.
Okay. Now, let's talk about February 24th. Can you describe for the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, what were you doing that morning? What was your plan for the day with work or with the family or?
Sure. February 23rd is my birthday, and the evening I was planning to drive to New York with Valerie. My friends in New York had planned a birthday party for me in New York.
And I'm sorry, the 23rd was your birthday. Are you talking about the next day?
The previous day.
Previous day of 23rd?
So I believe February 23rd was a Thursday, which was
Right.
my 38th birthday, and the
Okay.
24th was the day that.
Okay. And my question was, when you were talking about going up, your friends were having a party. You're talking about the 24th?
Well, yes, because that was Friday, and I had to work on that Friday still, so I was going to go to New York in the evening.
Okay. So the 24th, your day was planned, and what did you fill your day with in terms of your plan?
So, but in terms of the day was an important day for me at work as well. There was a important meeting for one of my cases. There was going to be a undercover operation for one of my cases. And we were meeting with the undercover officer, a senior special agent, and my manager. And that meeting was scheduled for 9:30 that day. This was a particularly important meeting for me, as had been indicated that success in this case may lead to me getting a promotion to a senior special agent.
Okay. So had you ever heard that kind of talk before?
Yes. Other people that were hired at a similar time as me, you have to hit certain milestones before you could progress to being a senior agent.
So Friday, February 24th, 2023 was potentially a milestone for you
Yes,
in terms of your career?
it was supposed to be the meeting that would set up for the undercover operation, which was going to take place most likely on Tuesday. So we were going to go over all the documentation and the plan for the operation on Tuesday, the following week.
Okay. Now, so what did that mean in terms of your normal waking up or any other usual habits?
I woke up a little bit earlier that day. I was planning to get to my office, which is in Vienna, a little bit earlier so that I could set up the conference room, have my documents ready, have my presentation ready, have the document for the operation available so that it could be signed off by management.
Okay. And so what time did you wake up that morning?
I believe I woke up 6:30.
Okay. And do you remember whether or not Christine was up?
Christine I had seen seemed to be awake and on her cell phone when I was getting ready and taking a shower to get ready for work.
That is fundamentally impossible, because Christine's cell phone had been turned off and placed in the kitchen cabinet. Her phone wasn't used that morning. It's shocking to me that he believes that anyone would believe him, that he's under the impression that if he talks as flaccidly as possible, that everyone will be convinced of his innocence, over the direct, unflinching evidence, of course. But more importantly, Brendan has just begun recounting the last time he saw his wife alive, which was the day he watched her murder, and he has absolutely no emotion. He isn't sad, he isn't remorseful, he is as bland and withdrawn as possible. He showed more emotion when talking about his girlfriend, who he claimed she barely cared about.
Okay. Now, did you have any sort of interaction with her at that time?
Yes, she was aware that I had this meeting that day. She wished me luck. She said that she would talk to me before I headed to New York with Valerie. Told me she loved me and have a good day.
Okay. So you carried on with your morning. What did that entail?
I went downstairs and got my work laptop out of the basement. My work from home space at that time was in the basement. I have a desk. I have a desk down there. It's because it's quiet. So I got my work stuff ready. I made sure that I had all of my equipment. Getting ready on a typical day would mean that I need to have my credentials, which includes my badge, my firearm, my holster, my handcuffs, two magazines, a belt clip badge, my work cell phone, and then generally I would also have my personal cell phone, my wallet, and my keys, which includes to my government vehicle.
And so you had a holster that would hold the gun?
Yes,
And to what side was that holster?
it's on the right because I'm right-handed.
Okay. And so presumably you're putting it in the right and the gun comes out of it on the right side?
Correct.
Okay. Now, who else was up when you, and what else was going on in the house that you were involved with?
I know Juliana was downstairs when I came upstairs from getting my work stuff out, my work laptop out of the basement. I don't remember exactly what she was doing. I think she might have been getting stuff ready in the kitchen.
Let me just stop you right there. Prior to that time, which would be February 24th, had you ever taken Christine's laptop or taken her phone out of a bag near the door?
No, I don't take her laptop. I have no reason to use her laptop. I don't have access to her laptop. It's not a password that I know. I have my own work laptop. I have my own home desktop. I have my own, actually I have two cell phones. I have a personal cell phone and a work cell phone. Our devices were completely separate.
And so, in terms of, that's fine. In terms of the idea of the laptop, where it would be on a regular basis, do you have a recollection of where she would put her laptop?
Christine kept her laptop actually in several places. Sometimes it is by the front door when she gets home. She would have a backpack, and she would bring the backpack and drop it off, and generally go visit Valerie and our dog and me. But usually she would go upstairs and she would bring her backpack with her, and her desk is in the sitting area of our master bedroom. So if you were to go into the master bedroom, you can kind of either go left or right, and to the left is the sitting area, which is where Christine does her work and has her desk and her file and has her files for her job. And if you went to the right, it would be where the master bedroom is, and for a little bit further, the master bathroom. But she didn't also only keep her laptop at her desk. I would say the majority of her use would be sitting in bed with her back against the headboard, while she had TV on or something like that. And when she would be done, she might put the laptop in between her nightstand and the bed, or on the nightstand itself, or back on her desk, generally at night.
And what about her phone? Where would there be a particular place where she might leave her phone?
I mean, her phone was basically always connected to her. Her phone wasn't really away from her basically ever. I mean, she would keep it in her pocket.
So following up on the discussion we had about a plan, was there ever any time, and I think you indicated that you never went and grabbed her laptop or whatever, was there ever any time you observed Juliana going to grab her laptop or her phone?
I never observed Juliana grab her laptop or her phone. Juliana also has her own laptop and phone.
Now, what, if anything, was Juliana and what were Juliana and Valerie supposed to be doing on February 24th?
Christine had scheduled for Valerie and Juliana to go to the zoo, at the main zoo in Washington, D.C.
Okay. Did you have any role in that?
I didn't have any role in planning the trip. I was aware of the trip.
And how did you become aware of the trip?
Christine had told me that that was something they were going to do.
Okay, so you never kind of forced that on her for the 24th?
No, it was also written on our calendar. That was shown earlier. Christine had written it on the calendar. She had also written it on Juliana's work schedule in her au pair book.
Let's say that this is true. Neither Brandon nor Juliana planned the trip to the zoo, and it was something that Christine had placed on the schedule weeks in advance. That doesn't change any aspect of the rest of their plan.
What, if anything, did you know about the plan for that day for them?
I knew that they were planning to go in the morning. I don't recall if I knew what time they were supposed to go, but I knew they were going in the morning, and I knew that when I saw Juliana in the morning, that's what she was working on doing was getting Valerie ready. But Juliana had actually asked me to go get Valerie from upstairs. At some point in the morning, I heard Valerie's feet, meaning that she got out of her bed and pounded down the hallway and ran into my room.
Okay.
And so Juliana had asked me to get Valerie because Valerie wasn't in her room to start getting her ready. So I got Valerie out of my bed, which happened after I had finished getting my equipment ready.
And did you see Christine there?
Yes, when I had gone back upstairs, Christine was there, and she was sitting up. She was sitting up in bed. She had the blanket over her lap. She had both her laptop and her cell phone.
Okay, and what, if anything, so when you took Valerie, where did you take her in order to?
Valerie was sleepy, so when I picked her up, she was still kind of limp, and I carried her downstairs to Juliana, and Juliana got her, kind of woke her up gently and changed her out of pajamas and into her clothes for the day.
Okay, did you take any part in getting ready, get sandwiches ready, get anything like that ready?
No, I was getting ready. I was getting ready to leave myself. I wasn't.
What
Besides collecting Valerie, I wasn't doing anything to help them get ready for the day.
What time did you get out of the house that day? Do you have any recollection?
Roughly 7.
Okay.
A couple minutes after 7.
Would that be a usual time for you to leave?
I would say a more usual time for me to leave is roughly 7:30.
Okay. And in this instance, you were going earlier for what reason?
I was going earlier to just make sure that I had plenty of time in Vienna to get my presentation ready and have the conference room ready for when management was going to inspect my operation and documents for the operation that was supposed to happen on Tuesday.
Okay, and I'm sorry, you said Vienna. Why Vienna?
Vienna is where my office is. We have a couple offices, but that's the one that I am stationed out of.
That's the home office for you?
Yes, that's my home office. The main office is in Washington, D.C., but this is one of the satellite offices, and that's the one that I work out of.
And what time was that meeting set for?
It was set for 9:30.
Okay, so you left at 7 for what reason?
I left at 7. I was going to go get breakfast, and after breakfast, I was going to get on the 267 toll road and head towards my office.
Okay, and where did you end up going to breakfast that morning?
I went to McDonald's for breakfast.
Okay, is that a common occurrence for you?
I would say that I occasionally go to McDonald's, but I often pick up breakfast on my way to work. Not necessarily McDonald's. Sometimes it's bagel places or place to get an egg sandwich.
Okay.
Things like that.
So it's not uncommon. You don't usually make your breakfast at home?
On the weekend, I usually make a bigger breakfast for everyone. But no, normally I don't make breakfast for myself before work.
So when you went to McDonald's, you saw the video that the Commonwealth showed of you driving up to the drive-through,
Yes.
and it looks as though, well, it appears you go past the drive-through at one point. Is that correct?
It did. I circled the drive-through.
What was the reason for that?
The McDonald's app has a QR code so that you get reward points and you can use the deals that you get. And when I initially opened it, it didn't provide me with my code. And that's why I was blocking the drive-through. And so then I basically just got back in line once the once the code came up.
Okay, and so,
It was pretty quick.
and you had that app on your phone at that time?
I've had the McDonald's app for several years.
Okay. Now, when you, so, I'm sorry, explain to me a little bit about that app. I'm not familiar with it.
You can order directly from there, but that's generally not what I do, because then the food gets made before you get there. So normally, I just open up the QR code section, and you can look at the deals, and the deals tell you, you know, you can get a free hash brown with your breakfast, and you can load that, or you can get a orange juice or coffee with it, and then you'll get reward points, and you can use the reward points to get free food too. So
Okay.
it's kind of a loyalty app that's you would find for many restaurants.
And so, when it didn't work the first time, you came back around,
Yeah.
and did it work?
Yes. Then my QR code came up, and I went to order.
Okay, so when we see you in your work vehicle with your sunglasses on, you got your food after that?
Yes.
Okay, and then what did you do?
I pulled straight forward. The McDonald's, the shopping center that the McDonald's is in, the McDonald's is kind of a standalone building. But basically you cross over the road. It's a road in the parking lot. You cross over the road. It's only, you know, it's a two-way road. And basically right on the other side of that road is parking space. I was going to sit there to eat my breakfast.
Okay, and what was the parking space, what was the landmark next to your parking space?
It's kind of in front of Chuck E. Cheese, but it's really only a few feet from the exit of the drive-thru.
Okay, and so you went there to go eat your sandwich?
Yes, but I started eating a cookie from Midnight Treats that my friends had brought me for my birthday the day before. If you're familiar with a place like Crumble, they're large cookies.
Okay.
I ate that first.
Because he is talking about his actions the morning of the murder, we can skip forward. But it is truly astounding how much time he's wasting here, and how awful he's actually doing. He's recounting what should be the most traumatic morning of his life. He's going over his actions before being alerted to his wife's attack, and then murder right in front of him. And he's blandly talking about his McDonald's order, while smiling about how he ate a crumble cookie before starting breakfast. Oh, what a day. He didn't smile while talking about his wife, he didn't smile when describing her last known actions, he didn't smile when talking about how she loved Valerie, which was the only compliment he was willing to give her. But he was beaming from ear to ear when talking about the cookie he ate before her horrific assault and murder that he planned.
Okay, so you ate the cookie, and then what happened?
I started my car back up and went back to McDonald's to use the restroom.
And is that in the video the second parking or the first parking space that you went into?
Yes, so you see me park next to the side entrance of McDonald's.
Yes. And then what, if anything, I mean, you went to the restroom, so what happened then?
As I was finishing up in the restroom, I received a call from Juliana.
And without saying what she said, what did you do?
I left the restroom and went back to my car quickly.
And was she alarmed at the time?
She sounded that she was very stressed.
Okay. And did you tell her that you were coming back?
I did not tell her that I was coming back on that original phone call. On the original phone call, I told her that I was going to call Christine.
Okay. And did you do that?
I did try to call Christine, but I did not reach her.
Okay. And so in terms of your communications with Christine, was that unusual for her to not pick up the phone?
I wouldn't say that it's unusual for Christine not to pick up the phone, but I would say it's unusual that her phone would go directly to voicemail. Many times if I would call her, she could be busy at work, but her phone would probably be on silent, and therefore it would ring and then go to voicemail. And then she might text me or call me back and let me know when she can call me. But it was unusual that her phone went directly to voicemail.
Okay. Now, and so what did that cause you to do?
I believe I tried to call Christine again, of which it went to voicemail straight again. After that, I called Juliana back, and I told Juliana not to house, and that I was going to return to the house.
Okay. And did you do that?
I did.
How long did it take you to think to get back to the house?
10 minutes, 11 minutes, 12 minutes, hard to say.
How long would it normally take?
I guess it depends on, there's a couple traffic lights. 8 to 12 minutes.
At that point, were you rushing? Were you?
Objection leading.
What if, at that point, how was it that you were proceeding back to the house after the two phone calls that Christine didn't answer and the phone calls you received from Juliana?
I started driving quickly back to the house. I took the most direct route.
Okay. Now, if I can just stop you right there. Was there any plan for how something would happen with Juliana on February 24th?
There was no plan with Juliana on February 24th. As far as I knew, Juliana was going to be going to Valerie, and Christine had just taken off from work, and I understood that she was going to be home, but I didn't know anything else at that point. I was more concerned with my day of what I had to do at my job.
Prior to leaving the house, did you do anything with anyone's devices other than your own?
I didn't touch anyone else's devices that I remember that morning. I was just getting ready for work.
Okay. Specifically, did you touch Christine's devices, either of those?
No, I did not touch her devices.
Meaning the laptop and the phone?
No, I did not touch her devices.
This is where court broke for the day, but his time on the stand was far from over. More importantly, he once again becomes nervous when stating that there was no plan to kill his wife that morning. It's almost comical how his behavior changes in these select moments, making him look as guilty as possible. We've reviewed plenty of occasions where a guilty party takes the stand in their defense, but after day one, we have to say that Brendan is one of the worst. He appears to have the charm of a throwaway furniture dust cover. That is to say that he is lacking any sort of charm and relatability that would have endeared him to the jury at all. He refused to compliment his deceased wife in any meaningful way, and even when he is given the opportunity to look over photos from their lives together, he remained entirely unaffected and bored. He might have thought that any sort of emotional display would have been viewed as false or manipulative, but his withdrawn attitude when it came to talking about the person he stood accused of killing was deeply disturbing. Furthermore, Some of the only times he managed to show any significant emotion were when he was boasting about himself. First, when he recited how he was teaching his daughter about math and science. He seemed to think that that made him Father of the Year. He didn't talk about any of her interests, only that he's been tutoring her since the age of 2 because he thinks her potential intelligence reflects highly on him. Then his smug attitude returned to the stand when he recounted how he, the sexy, debonair, devil-may-care IRS agent, was sexually pursued by his own live-in employee. Ooh, anyone want to file some taxes? Despite the fact that the affair served as motivation for his wife's murder, according to the prosecution, he could not help himself but to describe the situation as if he was writing to Playboy magazine. His testimony lacked any real humanity. It was completely void of any reason for the jury to think that he was a good guy who wouldn't have considered murdering his wife then humiliating her after death, which would be the entire point of his testifying. But now let's go to day 2 of his time on the stand. This footage comes to us from the WUSA 9 YouTube channel, and a link to the full video will be left in the description box down below.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. All right. Your next question, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Banfield, we left off, and I had asked you the question on February 24th, 2023, had you touched anyone's devices other than yours?
No, I had not.
And had you specifically touched the laptop that you know was Christine's laptop that she used for work?
No, I did not.
Or her phone?
No, I didn't touch either the laptop or her phone.
Now, we were speaking about February 24th, 2023, at the time that we broke for the night last night. One of the things that I wanted to get into, and it will require us to go back, Juliana Perez Magalhaes was your au pair, correct?
Yes.
And she worked through a company, correct?
Yes.
And what were the limitations in terms of what she could do in terms of work, and how long could she stay?
In general, she could work, I believe, 45 hours a week. Her term for how long she could stay, she had a contract with us for a year.
Okay. And at the time that you told the ladies and gentlemen of the jury that you and she started a relationship, had she wanted to extend at that point?
She had already extended her visa for a second year. So I believe it was October of 21 that she came for her first year. And then she extended for a second year, which would have gone to October of 23. But no, she had not indicated anything about extending further.
Okay.
And she couldn't be extended further as an au pair at that point, is my understanding.
But when she first came, she was, how long was she supposed to be staying?
1 year.
Okay. And there came a time where she requested to extend. When did that happen in terms of the time frame we're talking about?
Maybe that summer, that summer of 22.
22. Okay. Would that have been prior to the two of you, your relationship changing?
I believe it had been discussed prior to that, but I don't know that decisions were made.
Okay.
It's baffling how terrible of a liar Brendan is, because every time he is asked something that has a little bit of weight behind it, that would serve to destroy the motive the prosecution is claiming he has. He begins stuttering and looking around like a child caught in the midst of some prank. The question was clearly meant to show that the decision to extend Juliana's contract was made prior to them having sex and starting their affair. The goal was to show that he did not make that decision because he was deeply in love with her, but because she was a good nanny for Valerie. But when he is called to simply say the decision was made before, he can't do it. He begins to sputter, like a faulty car engine. And then he says that he isn't sure, but they definitely did talk about it before. It's almost as if he wants to look guilty. But again, he willingly asked to go on the stand. His lawyer likely discouraged him from doing this, knowing the sheer amount of direct evidence against him, and he refused to listen. He thinks, or at least thought, that his word alone would be strong enough to destroy the state's case.
Now, as part of her cultural care obligations or your obligations, what did you have to do on your side to assist her?
I didn't do anything to assist her. Christine was the one that handled all the cultural care forms, payments.
Okay.
Whether or not to extend or I didn't do anything with that process really.
Okay. And so that was pretty much mainly Christine, is that correct?
Yeah, I believe that she had all the contact with, I don't know the exact title, but the person that manages the au pairs.
Okay. Well, then, if she had done that, then I won't ask you any further questions about that. Now, we were previously talking about February 24th, 2023. And I think you had described for the ladies and gentlemen of the jury that you had come back from the McDonald's, correct?
Yes.
And when you arrived back from the McDonald's, who did you see there?
Valerie and Juliana were at my white Ford Fusion vehicle. They were parked in the cul-de-sac, kind of in front of my neighbor's house, just outside my driveway.
And do you recall, was the car running? Were they in the car? Were they out of the car?
They were in the car at that point. I don't recall if it was running. It's a hybrid, so you don't necessarily hear the engine when it's kind of in idle.
Okay. And when you approached Juliana, what, if anything, did you do?
I asked her if the person just went into the house, as that was a question from previously, and she had indicated yes.
Okay. And was there a specific, at that point, did you know how the person got into the house?
I knew that they got into the house through the front door, but I didn't know more than that. It sounded to me at that point that they just went into the house without delay, I guess.
In our previous video on this case, we mentioned how Brendan and Juliana's reaction to Joseph Ryan entering the home made very little sense, given what Juliana supposedly saw. According to their ruse, Juliana had to return to the home because she forgot the lunches that she packed, and that is when she saw an unknown man park a car in the driveway of the home and then enter. Sure, this person was a stranger, but he arrived at a respectable hour, in broad daylight, wasn't wearing a disguise, and was comfortable enough to park directly in the driveway. Moreover, he didn't peek through any windows or attempt to find an alternative way into the home. He entered directly through the front door, as Brendan had left it unlocked. His actions were very unlike a typical burglar, looking to burgle, or any sort of criminal for that matter. It would have made more sense for Juliana to assume that he was some invited guest who Christine had let into the home, versus believing that he was a potential threat. And that same thing applies here. Also, Brendan cannot control his micro-expressions, and while recounting what he claims is one of the most traumatic experiences of his life, his mouth keeps quirking up into a smile. He's discussing arriving back home to confront the man responsible for killing his wife he loved apparently so dearly, and he's still smiling.
In terms of what you were told by others?
Yes.
Okay. Now, what did you do at that point?
I told Juliana to stay at the car.
Okay. And what about regard to Valerie?
I didn't address Valerie specifically, but they were in the car, and I had just told Juliana specifically to stay at the car.
In doing that, was it your intent that she would stay with Valerie?
Yes.
Okay. At that point, after you told her that, what did you do?
I walked partially down my driveway. My driveway is kind of a little bit long because it splits between me and my neighbor's driveway. And this was so that I could see a little bit better of what was going on. And this is when I saw a silver Jeep in the driveway, and that my front door was closed.
So, not only did Joseph Ryan park his car in the Banfield's driveway, he also owned a car that was deliberately eye-catching and would stand out. He wasn't using a work van or a small compact car. He was driving a shiny silver vehicle that most people would notice. His behavior is completely uncharacteristic of a serial offender or even a small petty criminal.
Now, so at this point, knowing what you know at the point that you saw the silver Jeep, how did that make you feel, and what were you concerned about at that point?
I guess it made me very anxious. I didn't know what was going on. I had concerns that this was going to be an affair, but I didn't know really I didn't really know what was going on at that point.
Okay. Did you think to call 911 at that point?
I didn't think that, it wasn't on my mind at this point that this was some type of violent or threatening encounter.
Okay. So what, if anything, did you do at that point?
I didn't continue going down the driveway. I basically made a right, which would be over the grass of my property, and headed towards my back fence.
Okay. Now, but you were closer to the front door, is that correct?
Yes, I was closer to the front door at that point.
Okay. Why didn't you go through the front door?
My front door has a electronic door lock. You would enter a code in order to gain access to the door, and every button that you push makes a beeping noise, and then the deadbolt makes a mechanical noise as it unlocks. It makes quite a bit of noise, and I didn't want all of that noise.
And what was your concern if there was going to be noise in the front area of your house?
I didn't know what was going on, if there was an affair going on. I didn't want to alert it at that point. I also thought about just getting the lunches for Valerie and Juliana that they were missing and leaving. That was also a thought.
Okay. Now, you're talking about the lunches. Why do you say that?
Juliana had informed me that she did not bring the lunches that she was going to take to the zoo for her and Valerie.
Okay. And moving forward, did you ultimately find those lunches in the refrigerator?
Yes, they were in I believe, the upper left of the refrigerator.
Okay. So if you can, for the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, give them an idea of, from the front door, and I think it shows in some of the body-worn camera, but if you could explain it, the front door and the noise from the front door was a concern to you. Why, based on the layout of the house?
So the front door kind of leads to the foyer. The foyer is 2 levels and goes to, basically it's echoes right to the top of the stairs. The stairs are immediately to the right of the front door, and if you were to go up the stairs, the hallway is open to the foyer.
And is it easy to hear what happens at the front door?
Basically, everywhere on the main level can hear when the front door beeps and unlocks.
Okay, so we left off where you were going around the back to the backyard.
Yes.
What, if anything, did you do at that point?
I unlocked my back gate. There's a carabiner latch on there to make sure that the dog does not unlatch it. So I unlatched that carabiner and reclosed the gate, and then headed around back to my back basement door.
Okay, and did you access the house?
Yes, I unlocked the door, and while I was unlocking the door, my dog was in the basement, which is unusual, as the basement has a door that's pretty much always closed. So my dog Lily doesn't have access to the basement normally, and she was jumping up and down at the back door when I was going down there.
Now, let's just talk about the locked door from the back where you came in. How did you access that?
With my key?
Okay, and in general, were your doors locked when you left the house?
Yes.
Okay, was that something that you took care to make sure of?
I mean, the basement door wasn't used too frequently, so it remained locked almost all the time. Sometimes the back door by the deck, sometimes that would be forgotten to be unlocked, because that's the door that we let the dog in and out of 20 times a day.
Okay.
For those of you who haven't caught on, Brendan's defense is that he wasn't responsible for his wife's murder. She was. That she unlocked the front door after he left. Then she hid her own phone and laptop. And she is the one who put the dog in the basement, meaning that everything that the prosecution said he did was entirely her doing, so she could live out her secret fetish. That the only thing that he is guilty of in this situation is having a normal, unimportant affair with his daughter's caretaker, and also marrying a woman who is into such depraved sexual fantasies. It's perhaps the worst defense he could have chosen, because it makes him look extremely callous and disgusting, like a big pig. He's trying to frame his wife, who he brutally murdered, as being responsible for her own death, despite the fact that the prosecution has already proved that that was impossible. He's doubling down on his plans, even though almost every single aspect has been picked apart and debunked by experts. Even his ex-girlfriend has come forward, stating her part in the charade, but he cannot help himself but try and besmirch his wife.
And I'm sorry, I interrupted you. So you were in the basement and you were there with your dog. What's your dog's name?
Lily.
And what, if anything, did you notice about Lily's behavior when you went into the basement?
Lily was kind of frantic, is how I would describe it. She's normally pretty calm when members of the family come home. She'll just normally greet you and go about her business. She's not a young dog, but she was jumping up and down, and as it went in, she was spinning in circles and whining and I guess kind of chattering. She doesn't really bark. She kind of howls and moans and growls in terms of her communication.
Okay, and was she doing those things?
Yes.
And I think you indicated that there was a gate between the basement and the upstairs. Is that correct?
Well, when I had mentioned the gate, that meant the gate to the backyard.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But when I entered the basement, there was also a baby gate, but we used the gate for the dog, but not really all the time. The gate was blocking the stairs to go upstairs. The gate is, sometimes we would use it outside at the back deck to prevent the dog from going downstairs if it was particularly muddy out, or sometimes when some of the older members of our family were at the house, we would block the stairs going upstairs so that Lily would not bump into some of the older members of our family that aren't as stable. But the gate wasn't generally in use. The gate was usually in my garage and Lily would have access to the main floor of the house and the upstairs of the house generally.
And there's a dog bed in your bedroom, is that correct?
Yes,
Would Lily have access to that part of the house?
yes, Lily would have access to my bedroom generally at all points. She would generally sleep in my room.
Okay. Now, and likewise, would she have access to what was Juliana's room and Valerie's room and all the other rooms?
She didn't normally have access to Juliana's room because Juliana kept her door closed all the time. She did have access to Valerie's room, but she didn't tend to go into Valerie's room unless someone else was also in Valerie's room.
Okay. Now, so you're in the basement, and what happened next?
As I was opening the basement door, I guess, shooed Lily inside. She was kind of in the way of me going inside. But I saw that Juliana and Valerie were coming down the brick path, maybe 20, 30 feet away, after I had opened the door. And Juliana was carrying Valerie and had followed me.
And after your last discussion with Juliana, had you communicated with her in any way to come down to the house?
I never told her to come down to the house.
Okay. So your previous statement of stay in the car was still standing, I guess?
I believed that it was. That was how I ended my conversation with her, was for her to stay in the car.
Though Brendan's defense relies heavily on his wife being responsible for her own murder, he was also facing a child endangerment charge for bringing his daughter into the home while her mother was being sexually assaulted and murdered. And here he subtly pins the responsibility for that crime onto his paramour, Juliana. He would never bring his daughter into a dangerous situation. He had even told Juliana to stay outside with Valerie, but she couldn't help herself. So even though his daughter was in danger, he was not responsible and should not be charged. Wow. During the trial, many commenters were surprised that Brendan didn't at least try to throw his young girlfriend under the bus more. It would have been easy for him to do, given how he deliberately set her up to take the fall for him. But he seemed to realize that that was a terrible idea, but he still attempts to throw her under the bus, albeit in a more subtle way.
So when they got to the basement, what, if anything, did you do?
I allowed them access to the basement. I had the door, I guess, partially open for them. And then as they came in, I closed the door behind them.
Okay, and did you indicate to Juliana and Valerie anything relating to where they should stay?
We had a conversation in the basement. Again, I had searched the basement a little bit, and there's mainly one large room in the basement. There's also a bedroom, but in the large room where the couches are and the TV is, and there was workout equipment in there at that point. I looked around that room for a little bit and didn't see anybody. Very short time. But
And why were you looking around the basement?
well, I thought that there was somebody in the house, but I didn't know where that person was.
Okay. And so in terms of your search of the basement, did you do it like a law enforcement officer?
I would say that it was a quick search. The lights were off in the basement when I arrived, and I didn't hear any people or movement in the basement other than other than ourselves and the dog. So
Okay.
I wouldn't say, I didn't go into like the bedroom closet in the basement or check behind the shower curtain. I didn't do things like that in terms of a search. So, but I did, I guess, walk the main room. There wasn't anyone by the couches. There wasn't anyone there wasn't anyone by my desk, things like that.
Okay, and were those all in the open area?
Yes.
And did you look into any of the other areas? I mean, other
I
than
did,
the closet?
I did open the bedroom door that's in the basement, and I also didn't observe anyone there.
Okay, whatever concern that caused you to do that, you didn't have that any further, correct?
I did not have further concern that there was someone else in the basement that shouldn't be there.
Okay, so what, if anything, did you do next? And frankly, what instructions did you have for Juliana and Valerie?
So I instructed Juliana, well, actually, Valerie looked nervous. She was kind of wide-eyed looking at me, and I knelt down to her, and I told her to stay there with Juliana, and she said, "Okay, Daddy."
What a great father. His daughter seemed nervous when he deliberately and maliciously brought her to the area her mother was being sexually assaulted in. So he told her to stay put. Pretty good guy. That is sarcasm for anybody who's confused. We may sound like a broken record with that point, but there is something so entirely evil about that lone action, obviously. It wasn't enough to betray his wife. He had to destroy her legacy. He had to tarnish her reputation with her friends and family. And he wanted his daughter's last memory of her mother to be of her murder. And he can't even muster enough energy to pretend to be upset about any of it. He talks about comforting his daughter in such a stilted, weird way that you'd think he's talking about picking up the dry cleaning the night before, not accidentally bringing his daughter to his wife's death. It's really odd how truly inept this guy actually is, and even more so when you understand that he believes that he's better than everyone watching somehow. He thinks that he's the premier level con man. He's Dark Sam Fisher, able to sneakily sell his lies without breaking a sweat. But he's just the saddest, lamest person we've ever had the displeasure of covering.
And so at that point, when you were in the basement, was there anything that caused your concern level to change from when you previously testified that you were outside?
It bothered me that the dog was in the basement, as she's not normally there. But I guess I was glad that she was in the basement at that point with Juliana and Valerie. Valerie loves Lily a lot and spends quite a lot of time with her. But it was also weird that, going back to Lily, it was also weird that Lily's food bowl was in the basement. And it was spilled all over the floor. I think that also shows that Lily was in a bit of a frantic state.
And so where would Lily normally eat her food?
Her dog bowl is always in the living room. Her dog bowl is always in the dining room, where there's placemats for the dog on the floor, and that's where her water and food bowl are.
So the basement level is the lower level, correct?
Yes.
Where would that level that you're saying where Lily normally eats be?
That would be on the main level of the house, where the living room, kitchen, dining room is.
Okay, and as you walk up the stairs from the basement, can you give the ladies and gentlemen of the jury some indication as to what direction you would go to find that?
So if you go up the basement stairs, there's a door that would need to be opened. Facing away from the basement stairs to the left would be the stairs to go up. Kind of directly in front of you would be a half bathroom. Slightly to the right would be a very, very short hallway, only a couple feet. To the right would lead to the living room. To the left, so walking down that very, very short hallway, to the right would be the living room. To the left would be the kitchen, and through the hallway not the hallway, through the doorway of the kitchen would be, through the doorway of the kitchen would be the dining room where Lily's food bowl would be.
At some point, did you leave the basement?
Yes, after I spoke to Juliana and Valerie, I stepped over the dog gate and climbed the stairs.
Okay, so the dog gate was still in place?
Yes.
Did Lily attempt to follow?
No.
Okay, so
She can't jump over the gate.
So explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, to go up to the next level, you just up, was it one flight of stairs, 2 flights of stairs?
I mean, I would call it one flight of stairs, but it's, I don't know, 7, 8, 9 stairs, and then a small landing, and then 7 or 8 stairs again to the door.
Okay, and the door would be the door to the basement?
Yes.
Okay, so did you go up that basement stairs?
Yes, I did.
And what, if anything, were you intending on doing when you went up there?
Finding out what was going on in my house.
Okay.
Of note is the fact that Brendan has not commented about hearing Christine or her attacker after entering the home, which is odd because based on the evidence at the scene, as well as his initial story with police, he heard her struggling against Joseph Ryan from the moment he came through the back door. But so far, he hasn't mentioned that detail. He has instead implied that he thought that Christine might have been having an affair, and that he considered just grabbing the lunches Juliana forgot and leaving. That he didn't necessarily care enough about the potential intruder to see if his wife was okay, even though her phone had been shut off for unknown reasons. So he says multiple conflicting things here. He was so concerned about his wife's safety that he rushed home from McDonald's, believing that she was in danger. But also, he wasn't concerned about the intruder once he got there, because he assumed that she was cheating on him with absolutely no evidence. He didn't feel like there was anything deeply amiss in the home, but also he didn't want Juliana to bring Valerie inside. That he had no idea what was happening in the home, but also that Christine was trying to fight off her attacker in a home where you could clearly hear the front door lock from the basement.
When you got to that level, who was there?
When I went up the stairs, I closed the basement door behind me. I did not immediately see anybody on the main floor of my house. And I walked down that very short hallway past the half bathroom so that I could see into the living room and the kitchen area, of which I did not see anybody.
Okay, and was that a full search or just in the moment?
I guess I walked past the kitchen table, and I walked past the countertop, and also looked in the dining room. So I would say that I looked on the main floor of the house.
So you didn't see anyone on the main floor of the house?
No.
Did you hear anyone?
While I was looking on the main floor of the house, I heard sounds from upstairs.
This is an obviously BS story, because let's be clear, if you enter your home believing that your wife is either cheating on you or is in danger, you would immediately rush to their side. You wouldn't spend the extra time clearing the house for any further threats, because that would be top of mind, especially if you were able to hear them the entire time you were in the home. He claims that he only began to hear her when he got to the main floor, despite the fact that the door lock could be heard throughout the home. But let's say he's right. He exits the basement, and then from the bottom of the stairs, could hear something happening upstairs, and instead of rushing to her side making sure that she was safe, or even catching her in the act of cheating on him, he walked around the main floor, just for fun I guess. The only thing that would matter to any person in that scenario is ensuring that their spouse is safe from harm. The very idea that he could hear something happening upstairs but didn't go up there first is ridiculous. But Brendan already viewed himself as a very important, special, smart person. The next portion of the testimony is going to be infuriating and difficult to watch. Banfield is now going to attempt to sell the idea that Christine was enjoying the assault, because once more he's attempting to embarrass and frame her. He wants the jury and you, the viewing public, to believe that she deserved what happened to her, that she was asking for it, and that he, the uncomfortably smug-looking man on screen, is the victim in all of this. The footage is agitating, and again, if you were at all sensitive to discussions of sexual assault, I would not recommend you continue watching. As I always say, your mental well-being is important, and you don't need to feel the stress that could come alongside from watching this footage. So if this is where you leave us, thank you so much for watching up to this point. With all of that said, let's continue.
Okay. And what, if anything, did you do at that point?
I moved closer to the upstairs. I moved closer to the upstairs stairs, to the stairs heading upstairs, but still on the main floor of the house.
Okay. And was that a better position to hear or know what's going on?
That's where the sound seemed to be coming from. There's regular ceiling over the kitchen and living room area, but in the foyer area that leads to upstairs, which is where I heard the sounds coming from.
Okay. And what, if anything, did you hear?
I heard the sounds of, I would say, moaning, as well as sound of skin-on-skin contact,
And what did you think was going on at that point?
sex.
Okay. Why didn't you call 911 at that point?
Well, I believe that it was an affair that was going on at that point. That doesn't seem like an emergency for the police to be involved in, was my thought at that moment.
Okay. Now, what were you thinking at that point when you decided what that was?
I guess I was emotional at that point. While Christine and I had affairs, we had never seen each other with anyone. No one was ever caught in the act or anything like that. Hearing what I thought was sex was upsetting.
So what were you thinking to do? What was your thought process at that point?
I thought about just getting the lunches and giving them to Valerie and Juliana and having them leave. I thought about just ignoring the situation and going to work and dealing with this after work, hopefully when no one else is there. I thought about how Christine had just taken off the day before because she was originally supposed to be working on the 24th. And I thought about, well, this seems to be why. I thought about, well, maybe this is why she took off on the 24th.
Okay.
Because I didn't know that she took off on the 24th until the night of the 23rd.
So what made you stop from your initial thought of leaving and getting the lunches and letting Juliana and Valerie go to the zoo?
I guess as my mind was kind of racing in this moment, the sound, I guess, sounded like it changed to me. Instead of what I thought was the sounds of sex, I thought that the impact sounds sounded forceful, and that Christine's moaning sounded painful and not pleasurable, and that the distance between the sound of the skin-on-skin contact sounded too far apart for sex, and I thought that maybe she was being hurt.
So what did you do?
I started to go up the stairs.
Okay. Did you draw your weapon at any point?
While I was walking up the stairs, I did unholster my weapon, and I angled my body going up the stairs so that I was facing the bedroom door, which once you go up several of the stairs, you can then, I can see, because I'm taller, but you can see, I could see the bedroom door was partially open, maybe 8 to 12 inches, something like that, but I couldn't really see in the door.
But you could, were you able to determine whether that was the area where these sounds were coming from?
That is, I could tell that was the direction of the sound was coming from the master bedroom area. That's the only door towards the left once you go upstairs.
Okay. When you, from the main landing by the front door, to get to the top level, describe for the ladies and gentlemen of the jury the level that you're talking about where the sounds were coming from.
So once again, you would go up several stairs, and then there would be a small landing, and then you would go up one step to another small landing, and which then you would kind of U-turn or switch back and go up another 8 or 9 stairs to the top floor. I don't know exactly how many stairs, maybe 16 or 18 total, but like 8 at the bottom, and then the landing, and then 8 at the top, and then you're at the upstairs hallway.
Okay. Given what you'd heard, did you go right into the room?
Actually, I heard the door open on the main floor when I was by the landing. When I heard the door open on the main floor, I saw Juliana come up partially at the basement door.
Okay, and so you were both on the same level at that point?
No, I was on the stairs, heading up the stairs, and I kind of only did a quick glance, seeing that Juliana was there, and then I continued up the stairs.
And did you give her any instructions as to whether to go back to the basement?
I didn't say anything to her.
Again, Brendan hasn't figured out what his narrative actually is. He believes that he is listening to his wife having an affair. Then he thinks she's being assaulted, so much so that he unholsters his gun. But also, when his young girlfriend / nanny decides that she isn't going to watch over his daughter in the basement and instead tries to join him, he doesn't tell her to go back and protect Valerie. Those things directly conflict. It's either you thought your wife was in danger, so you unholstered your gun, or you didn't think there was any danger and saw nothing wrong with bringing your girlfriend and potentially your child to your wife's assault.
Okay, so you continued on,
Yes,
but you realized she was there.
I did.
What, if anything, did you do next?
I continued up the stairs and made a left towards the master bedroom.
Okay, and in terms of the landing where the master bedroom is located, describe for the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what way you had to go from the top of the stairs.
I went to the left, as that's the way towards the master bedroom. There's double doors to the master bedroom. To the right would be a bathroom, the guest room, Valerie's bedroom, and Juliana's bedroom.
Now, so you went left at this point?
Yes.
And what, if anything, did you do at that point outside the room?
Outside the room, I headed towards the door, and I pushed the right of the double doors open with my foot.
And did you otherwise have something in your hands?
Yes, I had my firearm in my hands.
Okay. And when you pushed with your foot, which foot was it?
My right foot.
Okay. And were you able to see or hear any more when you did that?
Pushing the door open with my right foot revealed Christine, and who I now know is Joseph Ryan. They were on the floor near the bottom left of my bed, kind of in front of the master bathroom door, just past the bed, in between the bed and the tall dresser.
Okay. So you just described it as the bottom left. Describe for the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, how do you come to bottom left? What position are you in order to describe it that way? If you're in the bed.
Yes, if you were in the bed or facing the TV that's in there, the left would be the bottom left corner. That would be the part that's closest to the master bathroom.
Okay, thank you. And so you indicated you saw Joseph Ryan and Christine.
Yes,
Had you ever seen Joseph Ryan before?
I had never seen Joseph Ryan before.
Had you ever had any communications with him before?
On February 24th is the only time I had communications with him in that room.
Okay.
Brendan is a bad liar. He's also a little sneaky weasel. He is asked directly if he's ever spoken or seen Joseph Ryan, given that the prosecution alleged that he was behind the FetLife account, and of course had set Ryan up to be the fall guy. The obvious answer his lawyer is looking for is a simple no, and if he wanted to give a fuller answer, no, I haven't spoken to him. But for some reason, Banfield answers as if he's trying to get off on a technicality, saying February 24th is the only time I've had communications with him in that room. The answer should have just been no.
So when you observed this, and please tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury exactly what you observed with regard to his contact with Christine.
Christine was, I would describe as nude and on all fours, on her hands and knees, and Joe Ryan was behind her, like angled slightly behind her, and from my position at the door, slightly to the left of her. He was clothed, and he was looking directly at me as I opened the door.
And when you first caught eye contact with him, where exactly were you in relation to the bed, and where were they?
No, I was maybe one step into the room.
Okay. Now, when you observed him, what, if anything, did you observe about the situation prior to anything being said?
I observed, basically, as soon as I went in the room, it appeared that Christine tried to get up, but I guess I'm unsure if it's that Christine tried to get up or if Joe Ryan pulled her up. It's hard. I can't really tell, but Christine went from being on all fours, hands and knees, to more like being on her knees.
Now, had you said anything to them or to him specifically?
Almost immediately, I said police,
Okay, and what was your intention in doing that?
alerting the room that I was there.
Okay, and at the time that you said police, was your gun in plain sight?
Yes, I was holding my gun forward.
And your badge, was that in plain sight?
My badge is on my belt, so that could. I don't know if he could see it, but it is.
Okay.
It is a gold badge that is attached to my belt.
And so, if you think of it as a clock around you, where would, at what point can you describe for the ladies and gentlemen of the jury where your badge would be?
Like 11 o'clock. So just to kind of in front of my left pants pocket.
Okay. And were you wearing a jacket over that area?
I was wearing a jacket that day.
Do you know if it was covering it or not?
No, I don't know if it was covering. I don't know if it was covering it at that moment. I don't remember if my jacket was zipped or not, and it's February, so
Okay.
I'm not sure if my jacket is zipped or not.
In terms of seeing the badge, you didn't pull it out and show it or anything?
I did not.
Okay. You just said police.
Yes.
And what happened from there?
Christine responded first. Christine said, Brendan, he has a knife.
Now, before she said that, could you tell, did you see any weapons at that point?
I didn't see a weapon. I didn't see a weapon at my initial viewing of the scene in that first couple seconds.
And after Christine said that to you, were you able to identify it?
I observed that there was something silver in Joe Ryan's right hand, but it was still difficult to see, as part of it would be in his grip and part of it seemed to be inside of Christine's hair.
Okay, and I think you'd said previously, did Christine have long hair?
Christine had pretty long hair that goes down past the middle of her back. It's a curly, thick brown. She had a lot of hair.
Okay. Now, just so we're clear, when at the time that you said police, what was the position of Joe Ryan and what was the position of Christine?
Joe Ryan was also on the floor. I would say that he was in a kneeling position. On the floor, partially behind Christine, partially behind the bed.
Okay. And the bed, is the bed high?
The bed is, I would say the bed is very high for a lot of people. It has storage dressers underneath the bed, and there was a foundation under it, and then the mattress itself is a thick mattress too.
Okay. So from your vantage, have you changed your vantage point? I think you'd said one step into the room.
Yeah, I had only basically gone one, maybe two steps into the room, and I didn't go further at that point.
Now, when you said police, what, if anything, did Joe Ryan say to you?
Joe Ryan didn't say something until after I told him to drop the knife.
Okay. And what was his response?
He told me to drop my gun.
And at that point, was there, well, let me ask you this. You saw a knife there. What were you thinking in terms of Joe Ryan with a knife to Christine's neck?
I was extremely terrified. I don't know that I've ever been more panicked in my life.
And so what were you thinking that you needed to do?
And again, Brendan cannot stop his mouth from quirking up into this creepy little smile when recounting what he just described as the most horrifying moment of his life. Again, the only times he has shown any emotion on the stand is when he's either lying poorly, like here, or smugly trying to boast about what a cool, intelligent, hot guy he is, or when he's talking about Crumble Cookie.
I was hoping to de-escalate the situation. I did not want to shoot him. I wanted him to let her go.
And so, after he said you dropped the gun, what did you say?
I repeated to drop the knife and to let her go.
And did he say anything to you?
He did. He told me that she was hers. That she was hers, and that she gave herself to me.
Brendan is an idiot, because there is no human alive who would believe that Joseph Ryan said that. Joseph Ryan, a man who tried to teach Christine via direct messages about how fetish play worked, safe words, consent in her role play, and more, did not hold a knife to her throat and declare that she was his, and only his, when a man brandishing a gun and identifying himself as police entered the room. This is something you would see on Criminal Minds or any other law enforcement related show that is focused on being entertaining over being realistic. People do not talk like this in their daily lives, and they certainly don't talk like that when they're in the middle of what they believed was a carefully coordinated roleplay scenario. Joseph believed that he was entering into a consensual kink play with Christine. He believed that they established parameters and safety measures that were beneficial for both of them, and the moment a third person appeared, with or without a weapon, he would have stopped. But that's not what he agreed to. It took a fair amount of time and effort on Brendan and Juliana's part to get Ryan to commit the act, because he wanted to be sure that things were done safely, not just for her, but for him as well. He wasn't an actual rapist. He was not someone who sought to harm others. He was just a guy, unfortunately, who was foolish enough to not meet the person behind the account before going to the house. But that doesn't align with Brendan's view of himself. It doesn't make him look cool and debonair to the general public, and it doesn't go along with his carefully executed plan. He needs Ryan to be comically evil and genuinely deranged, so that he can look like the good guy. He needs Ryan to respond like he's on some poorly written cop show, so then Brendan can look like the tragic hero as they run the credits. Who Joseph was in real life doesn't matter. None of that matters. At least, not to Brendan.
And Christine kind of yelled, moaned at this point also.
Okay, I'm sorry, you said she was hers?
She was his, sorry. She was his.
Can you say the whole statement of what
He said that she was his and that she gave herself to him, to me, is what, she gave herself to me is what he said.
Okay, and I'm sorry, I interrupted. What happened then?
Christine kind of yelled or moaned, or both, and it seems that she went to her left, my right, a little bit.
Okay. Now, when she yelled or moaned, what did that indicate to you?
I thought that she was being injured, being stabbed.
Did you see him stab her?
It appeared that he was putting forward movement towards, or it seemed that he was putting forward movement towards with the knife, but I couldn't see Christine's neck or face really at that point. Her hair was in the way.
Okay.
Again, logically, this doesn't make sense. As far as Ryan knew, he was engaging in a consensual role play that had been interrupted by police. He had evidence on his phone, which he had brought to the scene, that he had been asked to come to the home with a knife and have sex with Christine. That part of the story is entirely undisputed by Brendan, who deliberately planned for the police to not investigate Ryan's death too closely. But if that is the case, why would he begin to stab Christine? Why would he escalate his behavior, especially with a gun pointed directly at him? Why would he, someone who had evidence on his side to show he wasn't a rapist and that he had been lured there, not immediately drop the weapon and state that there's been a misunderstanding? Did he want to die? And if so, what evidence is there to say that that was even the case? Brendan wants the public to believe that Joseph Ryan was a sexually depraved individual who only cared about getting off and nothing else. That when he was confronted by the police and had a gun aimed directly at him, he escalated his behavior knowing full well it would lead to his death. But that doesn't align with the evidence in the case. Moreover, the knife he brought with him was relatively small. It was a kitchen knife, one that would generally not be associated with a violent crime. Because Ryan didn't actually want to hurt Christine, he brought a weapon that would fit into the fantasy that Brendan said she had, but wouldn't accidentally cut her. We should also point out that he is now discussing when he believed his wife began to be stabbed by Ryan. For the duration of his testimony, he was monotonously telling us that this was the most horrific moment of his life. Watching the woman he loved be stabbed by Ryan was traumatizing for him and made him physically ill. Oh no. But as he's gone over the events, he has continued to smile at inappropriate opportunities, causing his testimony to fluctuate between uncomfortably withdrawn and strangely smug.
So if you can, explain for the ladies and gentlemen of the jury why it was you couldn't see Christine's face or her neck.
Christine's hair was, I would describe as kind of wild at this point. Not normally it's brushed and straight, or, well, not really. I mean, it's still curly, but, you know, it's more kept. It was kind of large and frizzy at this point, and I couldn't really see very well.
Okay. And so I interrupted you. So well, go ahead and tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what you were following up with.
I'm sorry, I don't.
So you indicated in your previous answer that you couldn't see whether or not he had stabbed her in the neck or made contact with the neck.
Correct.
Okay. And that she had made some sort of a sound and pulled away.
Yes, so she kind of moved to her left and to my right, but my best guess is that he had a grip on maybe the back of her neck, maybe the back of her hair. I can't see his left hand at this point, and so she did not really go anywhere.
Did she appear to be injured greater than what you thought when you saw her?
It appeared that she had some amount of, I believe that she had some amount of blood in her hair at this point.
From where you could see it?
Yes.
Okay. Now, let me just ask you this. Other than your training, had you ever shot a person before?
I had never used my firearm outside of a range situation.
And just to clarify my question, it sounds like you had shot somebody in training. You just did training, correct?
I did not shoot anybody in training. I have not used my weapon in duty at any point, or the only time I had used my firearm was at a gun range or at training.
Okay. Was that a concern for you while you were in the moment?
There wasn't a lot of space between Joe and Christine. I was very fearful of hitting Christine.
And so what if anything, when the time came, well, were you considering using your firearm?
Yes.
At what point did that start?
I mean, very quickly in the situation, but you know, his head isn't far from Christine's head. I guess his part of his body is partially behind Christine's body. Part of his body is behind the bed. It's a very tight situation.
Okay. And so you delayed from your first instinct?
Judge, objection is to leading.
What, if anything, did you do then?
I'll sustain the objection.
I mean, I know that I told him to let her go at least one more time, and then I know that I told him that he was going to be under arrest.
Okay.
I missed that. At some point, he asked for me to leave, and at a different point, he asked for himself to leave.
And what did you say to those requests?
At that point, that was when I told him that he was under arrest.
Okay. Can you explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what, if anything, took place that caused you to discharge your firearm?
It appeared that he did a very forceful stab towards Christine, and Christine kind of spun away from him. So she was facing towards me, and I guess she rotated as she spun away from him and landed on her stomach on the ground. This kind of had Joe now on his knees, kind of facing Christine, of which I saw him do a downward stabbing stroke, and that's when I fired at him.
And when you fired, were you able to determine whether or not you made contact?
I didn't know where I made contact, but I believed that I made contact as he moved.
Okay.
He moved backwards, He moved backwards a little bit away from Christine. At that point,
And what did you do?
I immediately hurried towards Christine, and I actually stepped over her, and I told her to stay down as I stepped over her. I did this so that I could look at Joe Ryan and see if he was still a threat.
This is a partially new element to Banfield's story, which makes sense given the blood evidence. He wants to subtly warp his original version of events to align as much as possible with the direct evidence. So when it was found that he didn't immediately rush to his wife's side the way he originally stated, he changes his story. Now he stepped over her as she laid there bleeding, and instead went to check Ryan's body and verify he was dead. But notably, the blood evidence also proved without a shadow of a doubt that Ryan had been shot before Christine was stabbed. In her last moments, she believed that her husband had saved her from her attacker before he picked up the dull knife and stabbed her repeatedly in the neck.
And what, if anything, did you see when you went over there?
I saw the knife on the floor.
Okay, was that the first time you saw the knife in its full?
That was the first time I could fully see the knife. The other times, it was in his grip and obscured by Christine's hair.
And the knife that you saw is the same knife that you've seen in the Commonwealth's photos?
Yes.
Okay. Before, at some point, did you help Christine?
At that moment, I did not help Christine yet. I used my foot and dragged the knife towards me with my toe to move the knife away from Joe.
Okay, so if you can, so that there's an image in their minds, can you explain from stepping over Christine to doing what you just said with the knife?
I probably need to take another step or two to get closer to Joe. The knife was still very close to Joe. It's like I reached my right foot forward. I still had my gun pointed at him. So I reached my right foot forward, and I guess stuck my toe out and dragged it back towards me so that it was not next to him.
Okay, and what would you say the distance was where the knife was when you first touched it with your foot? I'm sorry, the distance from Joe Ryan when you first touched it with your foot?
Not more than a foot and a half.
Okay, and when you removed it from the area around him, how far was it from Joe Ryan?
Maybe 5 or 6 feet, but immediately next to me.
Okay, so what did you do then next?
I didn't notice that Joe was moving, and
Well, let me ask you this. Did you ever touch Joe?
I never touched Joe at any point during this encounter.
Okay. And when you moved the knife, what did you then, what happened next?
I turned around and faced Christine, and I kneeled down next to her.
Okay. And what was her position at the time that you kneeled down next to her?
At that point, she was on her stomach. She was kind of writhing back and forth, kind of rolling back and forth. And I guess at some point, pretty quickly, she rolled over onto her back.
Was that with your assistance?
At that point, she was doing that on herself. I don't think that I helped her roll onto her back.
Okay. What, if anything, were you doing to assist her at that point?
So she was holding her neck, and she told me that she couldn't see, and I asked her to let me see, indicating that her hand was indicating that her hand was covering her neck, and she very shakily removed her hand from her neck, and I could see the wound on the right side of her neck.
Brendan is now adding superfluous details to his testimony, seemingly in an effort to appear shaken up. This is a relatively common thing you see when people recount deeply traumatic stories, because they want to give themselves a bit of psychological reprieve. This is also seen when people are lying, as that can also be deeply stressful. But Brendan is trying his best to humanize himself to the jury. He wants to seem like a man who lost everything, like someone barely holding it together, but his attempts obviously fail, because it's like he's barely trying. He does not appear upset about his wife's death. He failed to compliment her at all earlier in his testimony. And even as he talks about holding her in his arms as she was dying, he doesn't even pretend that he's struggling. He's probably one of the worst liars and least charming individuals we've ever covered on this channel. And frankly, it's baffling that he believed that he'd be able to successfully convince anyone of his innocence.
Okay. And what, if anything, did you do at that point?
She told me to put my hand there, and she had put her hand back on her neck, and then I put my left hand on top of her hand, but she pulled her hand from underneath mine and put her hand back on top of my hand and put pressure on my hand, I think indicating that she wanted more pressure on the wound.
And did you do that?
Yes, I had.
Okay.
I had my hands on hers, trying to apply pressure.
And she was helping you?
Yes.
And so at that point, had you asked Juliana to call 911?
At that point, I noticed that Juliana was in the room, and I told Juliana to both call 911, and I told her to watch him, meaning indicating to Joe.
So the position that you were in when you were attending to Christine, where was it in relation to Joe at the last time you saw him?
Joe was behind me. I wasn't facing Joe. I was kneeling down with Christine in front of me. I guess my body orientation would be towards the master bathroom.
Okay. And what if anything happened next?
Juliana she looked like she was stunned, but after I told her to call 911 and watch him, she seemed to dart forward and went into the master bathroom.
Okay. And did you ask her to do that?
No.
Do you know what she was doing?
I mean, I know what she was doing now, but I don't think I was thinking about what she was doing at that second.
That's what I'm asking, is what was she did you know what she was doing at that time?
I don't think that's what I was thinking about
Okay.
I don't think I was thinking about what she was doing at that time.
Brendan continues to overcomplicate his answers, which only makes him look worse. Instead of saying, "I wasn't thinking about that," or "I was too focused on my wife," he sputters through, saying he didn't think he was thinking about that, as if he's not entirely sure, like when he said he'd never communicated with Ryan in that room before that specific date. His additions only serve to make him appear less credible.
Now, what happened next?
Christine told me that she was bleeding out and that she was sorry and that she loved me.
And what did you tell her?
It was at this point that there was another shot. And I looked up and I saw that Juliana had my other firearm. And I was stunned that Juliana had shot.
Okay. Did you, where was she in relation to where you were?
She was in front of the master bathroom door. This is kind of a double door.
And so, how far do you think she was from you when you shot?
Not very
Or
far
when
at
she
all.
shot?
Not very far at all. Maybe 4 or 5 feet.
Was there any indication as to why she shot prior to shooting?
I didn't hear her say anything prior to. I didn't hear her say anything prior to her shooting.
Now, at any point, do you recall Joe Ryan touching you?
So this was at roughly the same time as the shot. I don't exactly know, if I would assume maybe almost simultaneously. Joe Ryan struck me in my shoulder, like the back part of my shoulder blade.
That didn't happen based on the blood evidence at the scene.
And did you see him do that?
I did not see him do that.
How did you know it was him?
Well, he's the only person behind me. There's no one else. There's no one else behind me.
And after you felt that, was that when Juliana shot?
To me, those all seem to be within the same second. It's hard to say exactly.
Okay. Now, when you were, so you were tending to Christine prior to Juliana shooting, correct?
Yes.
Were you able to maintain whatever it was you were doing for Christine?
I don't know exactly why, but my reaction to being hit and Juliana shooting was to stand up. And I stood up and turned around and looked at Joe.
Okay.
Joe was then further back, closer to the wall, and partially on the dog bed.
Now, did you make sure that he was not getting up again?
I looked at him. He did not appear to be moving at that point.
Okay. What did you then do?
I yelled for Juliana to call 911 again, and I turned back around and went back to Christine.
Now, do you know what Juliana did with the gun that she used to shoot Joe Ryan?
At some point, I know she put it on the bed.
Did you observe that?
I don't think I observed her putting it on the bed.
Okay. And the gun that Juliana shot Joe Ryan with wasn't the gun that you have, correct?
No, the gun that I shot Joe Ryan with was my duty weapon, a Glock 19M, and the gun that Juliana took out of the safe, was a Glock 43X.
Now, the gun that you used to shoot Joe, was that put back in the holster?
I did not put my gun back in the holster. I put it on the ground next to me, basically just right at my side, kind of where I was kneeling.
So where, in terms of position when you were tending to Christine, what position were you facing?
I was facing Christine towards the master bathroom door, and yeah.
And so when you put your gun down in order to aid her, to what direction did you put the gun down?
I put it to my right, so it was in between me and the bed.
And to the best of your recollection, do you know where it was in terms of in relation to the corner of the bed?
It's pretty close to the back left corner of the bed. There wasn't too much space between me and the bed at this point.
And can you just tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, in terms of time that morning, after you put that gun down, what did you do?
Well, when I put the gun down, that's when I had originally started aid to Christine, and that was when I asked her to show me the wound, and then we had kind of both put our hands on the wound.
Okay. Now, did there come a time when you instructed Juliana to call 911?
I had instructed Juliana to call 911 at least twice.
Okay. And did there come a time where you realized that, when you were wondering what was going on with 911?
She seemed to be, after she shot, she seemed to be stunned and just standing there, not doing anything. And I yelled at her to call 911 again.
And do you know if she followed your
At that point, she seemed to, come out of her trance, and I know that she started working on her phone.
Now, why didn't you call 911?
I had a significant amount of blood on my hands, and I was trying to help Christine. And also, we're trained that if there's others around, if you can have them call 911 or assist you, that is something that you would instruct them to do.
So from inside the room, please describe for the ladies and gentlemen of the jury how that 911 came, how you came to be talking on the 911 call.
Juliana seemed to be pacing, kind of in front of the TV area of the bedroom and kind of moving towards the master bedroom door. She called 911, but when she called, she really wasn't saying anything. She was kind of stumbling over her words.
And so what, if anything, did you do?
I heard that she was on the call with 911. And I could hear the 911 operator asking questions, and so I answered the questions, of my home location and I guess briefly what had happened.
And what did you say?
I believe I said that there was a man that had stabbed my wife and that I had shot him. And I identified myself as an officer, gave my address. Yeah.
As a reminder, Brendan was trained as an IRS agent, not law enforcement, but he has attempted to align himself with law enforcement throughout his time on the stand. Him identifying himself as police during the attack, him telling the 911 operator that he is an officer, and talking about his background in vague terms while on the stand to imply a larger connection to police is all indicative of a very insecure person. Like the men who dress up as police and perform false traffic stops, Brendan wants to feel the respect that he assumes comes with a badge. It's not enough that he works for the IRS, because a lot of people wouldn't even know what that job entails. He wants people to view him as a strong, cool guy who is able to sleep around with a hot young woman, and then throw away the bad guys. He needs people to see him in that way, even though he's one of the most boring, bland wallpaper guys we've ever come across. And so he lies, or at the very least, stretches the truth. He does technically have a badge, and has worked with law enforcement before, so it's not entirely a lie if he claims to be an officer.
And at that point, were you still rendering aid to Christine?
Yes, we had spoke slightly more also during that time. She was coughing, and blood had come out of her mouth, and so I knew that that's possible for people to choke on blood. And so I told her I was going to roll her on her side, and she did, and so we did, and so I did that, and she seemed to know that that was also the right thing to do.
Okay. And so she was able to help you roll her over?
Yeah, so I rolled, so I guess it would be kind of slightly away from me, slightly more towards the master bathroom door, and further away from the bed.
Now, in the time frame that we've just talked about, did you ever get a point where you had a better idea of the wounds that were on Christine's neck?
After Juliana shot, and I went back to Christine. Once again, I put my hand on her hand, but she slid her hand from underneath mine and put it on top of mine. And actually, my finger went inside of her neck, and that made me realize how badly she was hurt.
Now, with regard to when the hands were removed off of the neck, was there any indication as to how badly she was hurt in terms of anything?
I'm sorry, could you say it again?
In terms of, once you took your hands off of her neck, did that give you any indication of the extent of the wounds?
Yeah, I saw the length of the wound, and the fact that part of my finger actually went inside of hers before I quickly moved my hand out.
Were you able to, and so were you able to continue compression?
I did try. I would say that both of us continued to try compression. Probably also just before she rolled over, I realized that she was holding her hand on the other side of her neck too. I didn't notice that previously.
2 hours and 40-some odd minutes in, Brendan has finally begun to try to emote during his testimony. He fails to actually shed any tears again, but does force his voice to break in spots while sniffling, which might have been enough for his initial interaction with police, but is certainly not enough while standing accused of murder.
So what side of the neck are you talking about now?
I was helping her with the right side of her neck, and she had her left hand on her left side of her neck.
Okay, so she was tending to herself on the left side of the neck?
Yeah, I didn't notice that originally.
Okay, did you assist her then at that point?
I did not put my other hand around her I did not put my other hand around her at that point. It was, I don't know, I guess we were focused, I was talking to her, and I guess I was a little bit more focused on that.
Okay. And in talking to her, did she assist you in any, in terms of how you could help her?
Basically, she had indicated that, she had told me that she, in her words and with her hands, that she wanted more pressure. After my finger had gone into her neck, I guess I tried to close my hand a little bit around the skin to try to, I don't know, I guess try to close the wound as much as possible, but it didn't seem to be doing anything.
Okay, and in terms of the blood, when you took your hand off of her wound, what did you see?
In the beginning, you could see that the blood was like, I guess, partially shooting out, and it was going through her fingers. But later on, that wasn't what was happening any longer.
Okay. And what, if anything, did you observe, and what did you do?
I mean, this was back to putting pressure and covering the wound, and
Now, did there come a time when the first responders arrived?
yes, after some time, the first responders arrived. I know that Juliana left the room at some point, and I know that I heard her go down the stairs. I think that 911 had instructed her to open the door. At a different point on the 911 call, the 911 operator advised to get towels.
Sir, we left off at the point when you were being told to let the first responders take care of Christine. Do you recall who it was that advised you to go into the bathroom?
I did not know the names of anybody at that point.
Okay. When you went into the bathroom, what, if anything, did you do while they were attending to Christine?
I was instructed to sit on the edge of the tub.
Okay. And at that point, what condition were you in?
I was panicked, shocked, worried, scared. I felt like I was having a very hard time breathing, and my leg was bothering me, seemed to be spasming.
So now, years after the body cam video, we have an answer for why Brendan was walking with a limp in the body cam footage. Even though he would report to paramedics and the officers that he had not been injured and was not in pain and was not in need of care, his leg was spasming in the aftermath of the attack, which is odd because the spasming seemed to switch sides. So were both of his legs spasming? And if so, why did he not report that? We are being nitpicky here, but it's fairly comical that he felt the need to address the fake limp. The flimp.
Okay, we saw from the body cam video, excuse me, we saw from the body cam video you received, I guess, a checkup in the ambulance?
Yes,
Okay.
some of the officers took me to an ambulance.
And what was that, what was the basis for them to get you checked out? Do you know?
I know at one point when I was in the bathroom, I went to the ground,
Okay.
and I wasn't walking properly. So they seemed to want to get me checked out.
When you arrived back home from the McDonald's, were you having any difficulties physically?
No.
During the period of time of what you described on February 24th within the bedroom, were you struck in any way that would have affected your lower extremities?
I don't remember being hit in my leg at all. I only remember being hit in the back of my shoulder.
Okay. And when you, I think it's partially showing on the body cam, but when you went down, describe for the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what happened.
I was crying. I was having, I guess I would say that I was hyperventilating. I stabilized myself with my hands on the floor. And I was scared for Christine.
We reviewed the body cam footage in our last video, and his breakdown after the murder is being largely overblown here. He attempted to cry and retch and appear deeply traumatized by what he had just been through, but he failed to properly follow through. Even though Brendan is a horrible actor, he is not entirely unintelligent. He knew that talking to the police was a bad idea, especially since he would be held to his initial version of events during the entire investigation. If he were to say something wrong, the police could zero in on him, which is the exact opposite of what he wanted. So, he faked his emotional breakdown so little would be asked of him. We're going to skip over a portion of the testimony, as they go over how Brendan had purchased new soundproof windows before the murder. The prosecution used this as evidence of when he began to plan the murder, but he claimed he wanted to do so for a while. In our opinion, it's mostly unimportant, but the fact that the defense waited to clarify this point towards the end of his time on the stand demonstrates that they believed that this point would be more important to the jury and the general public. They also question if Brendan had ever used Christine's computer, to which he says no, which was already asked and answered the day before. As always, a link will be left to the original upload in full, should you want to watch Brendan's frankly silly points.
Sir, have you ever used or looked at FetLife prior to the discovery that's come out in this case?
No, I had never used or looked at or heard of FetLife previously.
Were you aware of Christine using FetLife at all?
No, I didn't have any knowledge of Christine using FetLife.
Did you have any knowledge of whether she had used Craigslist ever?
I think that she did back in New York to advertise that we had a yard sale.
Okay. And that would be the extent of the use of Craigslist?
That's the only time that I can remember.
Now, at the tail end of his time on the stand, Brendan is once again going to pin the responsibility of his wife's sexual assault and murder directly on her. He wants to present her to the public as a sexual deviant who, in her quest to get off, put herself in the path of a psychopath. But to be clear, across every one of Christine's devices, there was no evidence that she had even so much as looked at porn.
How about something called Backpage? Did you ever know her to have used those kind of things?
No.
Was there any sort of, well, let me ask you this. How is it that you and Christine would primarily communicate?
Primarily, we would communicate on the phone. We would talk almost, when Christine would leave from work, she would almost always call me. Obviously in person when we're together. And if it's messages, such as when we're both at work, we usually use Facebook Messenger.
Now, in terms of what you've observed with FetLife, in your own relationship, were any of those sorts of things done in the bedroom?
There was a point a number of years ago that Christine had indicated that she was interested in bondage type situations.
Objection, hearsay.
Sustained.
This is frankly an insane note to try and end on, because it indicates that his defense believes that this is the smoking gun in the case, that his time on the stand was all leading up to this, where he says his wife, who never so much as Googled about bondage, non-consensual role plays, or even looked at porn, randomly asked him to try it years later. So does he have evidence of this? Of course not. But the jury should just trust that this happened, because he has done such a good job the past 2 days that they have no choice but to take his word for it. Never mind the fact that he is directly stating that his wife, the mother of his child, and the woman he swore to uphold and protect, was responsible for her own death. Never mind that he is publicly disparaging her name in order to save himself from the consequences of his own actions. He thinks the jury is listening to him and thinking, yeah, Brendan's a good guy. Of course he didn't kill her. It must have been her fault.
Without getting into what she had said, were there times when,
Objection leading.
Sustained is leading.
what if any times were there conflict in terms of sexual?
Objection leading.
Sustained is leading.
In terms of your sexual relationship with Christine, what, if any, differences did you have?
I was not interested in ever harming her. I was never interested in sexual violence. I would say that we also had a discrepancy of how often we would like to have sex, where I would like to have sex more frequently than we did.
But did those differences, what, if any, effect did those differences have on your relationship with Christine?
I would say that those differences caused some of the reasons why we had affairs at various points in our relationship.
Did you love your wife?
Yes.
Do you love your daughter?
Yes, sir.
Did you have any sort of plan for what February 24th became?
No, it was a situation I was never expecting, never expected to be in, would never want anyone to be in.
In terms of looking back on February 24th, what, if any, things do you think you would do differently?
Objection relevance.
I'll sustain the objection.
What, if any, things would you do differently in the room confronting Joe Ryan?
Objection relevance.
I'll sustain as to relevance.
When you shot Joe Ryan, were you aware of where you had hit him immediately?
No,
When was it that you found out that you'd hit him in the head?
actually, I wasn't sure. Where I hit him until we had discovery.
And why did you shoot Joe Ryan on February 24th?
He was attacking Christine. I mean, he was stabbing her. I mean, I wish I shot him earlier.
Your Honor, I have no further questions.
So, Brendan's time on the stand could not have gone worse, in our opinion. He failed to seem at all affected by his wife's death. He refused to compliment her parenting or anything about her, and he ended by blaming her for her own death, as well as being as boring as possible. But at the very least, he seemed to think that he did a good job, and that's what really matters here, I think, which makes his cross-examination even more spectacular. We'll cover that in the next video. As always, if you made it to this part of the video, thank you so much for watching. We will be uploading part 3 as soon as possible. So with that, I hope you have a good rest of your day, and remember, stay safe.